Chapter 656. Early in the morning, Duanmu Yao was standing by the gates of Long Fei Ye's Yaoshui estate, surrounded by a crowd of onlookers. Long Fei Ye's estate was located in the heart of the county town's downtown district, hidden in a deep alleyway. It was very quiet and secluded amidst the hustle and bustle. Its outer walls were very low-key and didn't attract much attention. It was all thanks to Duanmu Yao that so many people had gathered here today. Not only had she revealed the location of the estate, but she'd also brought a bunch of people with her to mix in with the crowd. These people were here to act as messengers. If Han Yunqi said a single wrong word today, they'd spread it all over Cloud Realm continent with embellishments. Moreover, Duanmu Yao even assigned a few people to deliver the news to Celestial Mountain. Not only did she want Master Kinzo to hate Han Yunqi, but everyone on Celestial Mountain to hate Han Yunqi as well. She wanted to make it so that Han Yunqi couldn't climb Celestial Mountain. Before she knew that Han Yunqi was her mother's murderer, Duanmu Yao was already thinking of ways to smear Han Yunqi's name. Now she'd stop at nothing. Currently, Han Yunqi's group was standing on the highest floor of the estate. They couldn't see Duanmu Yao from here, but they could see the figures of many onlookers. Long Fei and Han Yunqi stood in the middle, one dressed in black robes with a cold, heroic air between his brows. The other was dressed in a pink-purple silk dress, her style magnificent beyond compare. Gu Beiwei stood to Long Fei Ye's left. Although he was in a wheelchair, he still gave off a heroic and elegant air. Gu Qisha stood to Han Yunqi's right, his black robes draped over his body like a mysterious mystery. Mu Ling stood next to Gu Qisha in her gorgeous red robes. Chu Shifeng stood 3 steps behind Long Fei Yi, his hand resting on his sword in a respectful manner. The group of people standing on the balcony made for a beautiful sight that was even more beautiful than a garden full of spring flowers. Unfortunately, none of them looked happy, especially Long Fei Yi. He, who always liked peace and quiet, hated the kind of disturbance at the door the most. Han Yunqi observed the surrounding roofs and attics. She saw that there was no one in sight, but she knew that there must be a lot of people who came to watch the show. After all, this matter had been blown out of proportion. After all, the disparity between her and Duanmu Yao's martial prowess was too great. Many people had come to laugh at her. Gu Qisha stood on the railing, his eyes dark as he said, "Poison lass, I'm going to teach her a lesson first. I'll break the tendons in her arms and legs before you go out and fight her one-on-one." Was Gu Qisha here to make a fool of himself? Unfortunately, other than Mu Linger, no one else laughed. There was still half an incense stick's worth of time before Duanmu Yao's challenge time arrived. Gu Qisha turned back to look at her. "Poison lass, if you don't answer, I'll take it as a yes. Do you want me to plead guilty?" Han Yunqi rolled her eyes at him. "You were the ones who killed him. So what if you admit it? Do you think His Highness Duke of Qin is afraid of Western Zhou's imperial family?" Gu Qisha retorted. Was Gu Qisha here to ask for a beating? Long Fei Yi had unknowingly turned to stare at them coldly. He didn't make a move, nor did he speak. Instead, he stared coldly at Mu Linger, who was standing next to Gu Qisha. Gu Qisha immediately shut his mouth. He was wary of the threat in Long Fei Yi's eyes, but he didn't know that if Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi admitted to the crime, it wouldn't be as simple as offending Western Zhou's imperial family. Gu Qisha didn't know much about Duanmu Yao's backer on Celestial Mountain. Neither Long Fei Yi nor Han Yunqi had brought up the matter, so neither Gu Beiwei nor Gu Qisha knew how they were going to deal with it. Soon enough, it was time to leave. Long Fei Yi naturally accompanied Han Yunqi out of the room, followed by Gu Qisha and Mu Linger. Gu Beiwei didn't follow them, but said, "Esteemed Wang Fei, it's inconvenient for this one to move around, so I won't be going out. Please be careful." "Don't worry, it's just a small matter," Han Yunqi smiled. Before they left, Long Fei Yi instructed, "Chu Shifeng, escort Dr. Gu back to his rooms to rest." Gu Qisha couldn't help but feel doubtful. This doesn't seem like Gu Beiwei's style at all. Since when did Long Fei Yi become so humane? Did something happen between Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiwei while he was gone? Since he was in a hurry to leave, Gu Qisha didn't think too much about it. How could Long Fei Yi be humane? He'd probably only be a lover for the rest of his life. He'd told Chu Shifeng to escort Gu Beiwei because the man was supposed to help Gu Beiwei get in touch with Chu Tianyin. Although he didn't help Han Yunqi on the surface, he'd put in a lot of thought behind the scenes. As soon as it was time for the challenge, a commotion broke out at the gates. But this time, Han Yunqi didn't give anyone a chance to criticize her. She opened the gates on time. The rowdy crowd seemed to have been splashed with cold water as they fell silent. As soon as Duanmu Yao saw Han Yunqi, she angrily unsheathed her sword and pointed it at her. Han Yunqi, what grudge did my imperial mother have against you that you'd kill her? If I don't kill you today, how am I supposed to let my imperial mother rest in peace? As she spoke, she ignored Long Feiyi, who'd come out behind Han Yunqi and charged viciously at Han Yunqi with her sword. Slut, hand over your life. Despite the approaching danger, Han Yunqi's expression remained calm and unmoving. She crossed her arms in front of her chest and stood tall and poised, full of aura. Everyone forgot about Duanmu Yao's sword and only felt that this woman had the bearing of a queen. It was difficult to conceal her elegance and dignity. Seeing that Han Yunqi wasn't dodging, Duanmu Yao's eyes flashed with ruthlessness. She lightly tapped the ground with her foot and used the momentum to move with her sword, which was as fast as an arrow. In a flash, both she and her sword turned into shadows, their speed too fast for anyone to react to. Everyone knew that Duanmu Yao had received Kinzo's teachings and that her sword skills were exquisite, but they didn't expect her to be so strong. In the blink of an eye, the sharp edge of her sword had already reached Han Yunqi's heart. It's over. In that instant, everyone's minds went blank. They were all very surprised. Everyone thought that Long Feiyi would intervene, but given the current situation, even Long Feiyi wouldn't be able to stop her in time. Who would have thought that a miracle would happen? Long Feiyi hadn't intervened and Duanmu Yao had retreated. Duanmu Yao could have killed Han Yunqi, but she'd retreated on her own accord. In the blink of an eye, she was already 10 steps away from Han Yunqi. She lost her balance and fell to the ground, coughing up a mouthful of black blood. What's going on? Everyone was dumbfounded. Even Gu Qisha and Mu Ling were dumbfounded. Long Feiyi hadn't intervened. So what had Han Yunqi done? When did she become so powerful? Everyone took a closer look and saw that Han Yunqi was holding a golden needle in her mouth. It didn't look like the medical needle she usually used, but more like a concealed weapon dipped in poison, emitting a faint glow. Those in the know immediately understood what was going on. Han Yunqi was truly cunning, but also truly brave. She'd allowed Duanmu Yao to close in, but had used a poisonous needle to threaten her. Duanmu Yao only had two choices in the face of such a situation. One was to injure both of them and die, and the other was to retreat. If Duanmu Yao hadn't retreated, the needle in Han Yunqi's mouth would have taken her life at such a close distance. And if Duanmu Yao had retreated, she wouldn't have been able to unleash her sword energy. Instead, she would have been hit by her own energy instead. Duanmu Yao didn't have the courage to make an exception and retreat in her panic. She'd already spat out black blood, so her internal injuries weren't light at all. In reality, Duanmu Yao had already suffered internal injuries. Now, she'd suffered even more internal injuries. If the duel had started, Han Yunqi would have defeated Duanmu Yao in one move. With Duanmu Yao's current strength, she wouldn't have been able to deal with Han Yunqi's pear blossom teardrop rain. Everyone was dumbfounded when they realized what had happened. No one had expected the duel between these two women to end up like this. Hadn't it not even started yet? How could it have ended so quickly? Could Han Yunqi not be so scary? Han Yunqi held the poisonous needle in her mouth as she looked down at Duanmu Yao from above. Even men couldn't compare to her carefree and uninhibited aura. Her appearance was the symbol of first class, but her temperament and her elegance were even more unmatched. Gu Qisha and Mu Ling were also dumbfounded. They hadn't expected Han Yunqi to be so strong. Suddenly, someone in the crowd shouted, Han Yunqi is shameless. She used poison. How despicable. Han Yunqi narrowed her eyes and looked towards the source of the voice. She coldly said, Who said that? If you have the guts, come out now. Her fierce shout silenced the already quiet crowd. But then, there was someone who wasn't afraid of death and actually stood out. It was a girl around 14 or 15 years old. Her background couldn't be discerned from her attire, but she was actually Duanmu Yao's maid. I said it. The little girl's expression was haughty, a little like Duanmu Yao's usual haughtiness. This is between Duanmu Yao and me. What does it have to do with you? Who do you think you are? Han Yunqi coldly asked. Her words rendered the sharp-tongued little girl speechless. After a while, she finally replied, I'm speaking up for Miss Duanmu. Can't I? Are you feeling guilty? How is it unfair? Han Yunqi asked patiently. She hadn't expected Duanmu Yao to use violence today, only words. If Duanmu Yao wanted to slander her, she definitely wouldn't give her a chance. She definitely wouldn't leave any evidence behind. You used poison. You just poisoned Miss Duanmu, the little girl said righteously. What kind of logic was this? Han Yunqi laughed. Who said I can't use poison? Who? Before she could finish speaking, the little girl hastily interjected, Poison is a heretical art. It's used to harm people and is despised by righteous people like us. It's also forbidden by Medical City. You used this kind of evil thing to deal with Miss Duanmu. You're simply despicable and shameless. Han Yunqi angrily asked. You clearly know that this princess only knows how to use poison and not martial arts. As the proud disciple of Tianshan Kinzo, you called out my name and chased me all the way to my front door to challenge me to a duel. Yet you still don't allow me to use poison. Isn't this even more despicable and shameless? She was so angry that she wanted to laugh. She looked at Duanmu Yao, who was sitting on the ground, and coldly snorted. Duanmu Yao, if you can't afford to lose, then don't come. Duanmu Yao's internal organs were in pain from her own sword aura, and her conception and governing vessels were blocked. She had just managed to catch her breath when she heard Han Yunqi's words. She was so angry that her true qi almost flowed backwards and caused her cultivation to go berserk. She supported herself with her sword and stood up. How did I lose? So it's fine for me to use poison and hidden weapons? Han Yunqi asked again. Duanmu Yao knew better than anyone the extent of her internal injuries. In her current condition, she was no match for the Tang sect's hidden weapons. She still hadn't fully recovered from her shock, so how did she end up like this? Duanmu Yao, are you admitting defeat, or are you going to continue? Han Yunqi asked coldly. Although she didn't intend to accept the duel or admit her guilt, Duanmu Yao had attacked her as soon as she came up. She had to determine a winner. So what if you're the disciple of Tianshan Kinzo? Chapter 657. So what if she was Tianshan Kinzo's disciple and a martial arts prodigy with exceptional talent? Wasn't he still defeated by a trash like Han Yunqi in one move? To be exact, it wasn't just one move. Han Yunqi hadn't even made a move. All she did was spit out half of the poison needle she'd hidden in her mouth. Duanmu Yao had scared herself and immediately retreated to harm herself. Who knew how Duanmu Yao's people would twist the truth and spread the rumors? In any case, Long Fei Yi had already ordered people to spread the truth of the matter, even to Celestial Mountain. After all, Tianshan Kinzo was the head of the Wulin Alliance. Kinzo's disciples had always been proud of Celestial Mountain and thought highly of themselves. If they knew that Duanmu Yao had been defeated by someone who didn't know any martial arts, they would probably curse her for being a disgrace to Tianshan Kinzo. Duanmu Yao, I'll take your silence as an admission of defeat. Han Yunqi asked again. Duanmu Yao was extremely sullen. Everything had been well planned. Her senior brother wouldn't make a move out of fear of her master. She would beat up Han Yunqi first, then take out the evidence of her murder and demand an eye for an eye. Who knew things would turn out like this? Was she dreaming or not? Damn it. Han Yunqi, I'm not here to compete with you. Duanmu Yao changed the subject and said coldly, I'm not here to discuss victory or defeat with you today. I'm here to take your life and avenge my imperial mother. With a wave of her sword, 10 sword maidens stepped out from the crowd. Long Fei recognized the 10 swordswomen at a glance. These were Duanmu Yao's personal swordsmen who'd been raised on Celestial Mountain for years. Their skills in the sword weren't low, and their combined strength was enough to match Duanmu Yao's own skills. Duanmu Yao was determined to kill Han Yunqi. Long Fei's icy eyes slowly narrowed into slits, revealing a frightening killing intent. Han Yunqi seemed to sense Long Fei's anger. She retreated to his side and quietly took hold of his clenched fists from behind, comforting him in silence. Long Fei actually calmed down quite a bit. In fact, Long Fei Yi could rest assured that Han Yunqi was no longer the Han Yunqi of the past. In the past, Han Yunqi had always been afraid that the Tianning imperial clan would make things difficult for her. She was even more afraid that a single misstep would ruin Qin Wangfei's reputation and offend His Highness Duke of Qin. And now, her greatest fear had become her greatest backer. What was there for her to be afraid of? Duanmu Yao, one-on-one duels aren't just for show. Are you going back on your word? Han Yunqi asked with a smile. She did not give Duanmu Yao an explanation. It's fine if you want to go back on your word. So what if it's a group fight? It's not like I don't have people on my side. At her words, everyone turned to look at His Highness Duke of Qin. Although His Highness Duke of Qin was standing there expressionlessly with no intention of making a move, everyone's hearts still raced in their chests. With His Highness Duke of Qin here, there was no need to talk about one-on-one duels or group fights. His Highness Duke of Qin alone was enough to sweep away Duanmu Yao's group. Naturally, Duanmu Yao was fearful. Han Yunqi, she said angrily, this princess came here today for revenge. Don't talk nonsense. No one's going to fight you one-on-one or group fights you. Han Yunqi sighed. Then just what do you want to do? You were the one who challenged me to a one-on-one duel. You even brought a bunch of helpers. If you don't want to fight me one-on-one or group fights, do you want this Wang Fei to stand there and let you chop me up? Haha. Gu Qisha couldn't help but laugh out loud. Much of the crowd laughed as well. In Han Yunqi's eyes, Duanmu Yao's actions were truly laughable. There was no need for Long Fei to send people to spread the news. Naturally, there would be people who would spread the news. Duanmu Yao was bound to lose face. Duanmu Yao flew into a rage out of humiliation. She had clearly come here to avenge herself, so how did things end up like this? Men, get him. Kill her. She roared. The 10 sword maidens unsheathed their swords, and several black-clothed swordsmen appeared out of thin air to protect Han Yunqi. Han Yunqi didn't understand, but Gu Qisha and Mu Ling were shocked. They could sense the killing intent of these 10 swordsmen. Their martial arts were definitely much more powerful than Duanmu Yao's 10 sword maidens. Duanmu Yao could tell that these black-clothed swordsmen weren't simple. She shouted angrily, "Senior martial brother, Han Yunqi killed my imperial mother. I don't ask you to uphold justice for me, your junior martial sister, but I beg you not to protect her. You should also give my imperial father an explanation for this matter, and give my Western Zhou's citizens an explanation." Long Fei Yi said, "Where's the evidence? You slandered this prince's beloved consort for no reason. This prince wants an explanation from you. If you can't provide any evidence, don't blame this prince for being impolite." Tears welled up in Duanmu Yao's eyes. Aggrieved, she took out a golden needle from her sleeve and held it up for everyone to see. "This is a golden needle found in my imperial mother's body. It's poisonous. This golden needle is specially used by Han Yunqi when she's practicing medicine. Aside from her, no one else has it." The golden needle in Duanmu Yao's hand was indeed the same one that Han Yunqi usually used. This was a medical needle she had brought from the modern era. Its material, function, and shape were all different from those used in the ancient era. It had to be said that this thing was indeed a piece of evidence. Aside from special circumstances, Han Yunqi would only use this kind of medical needle when she was saving lives. Moreover, she would always disinfect it and put it away after use. However, there were a few times when she had dropped it in an emergency. Where had Duanmu Yao gotten the one in her hand? Chu Tianyin was already planning to rely on Long Fei Yi and was currently undergoing Long Fei Ye's tests. There was no reason for him to give Duanmu Yao something so important. Besides Chu Tianyin, who else could have gotten their hands on her needle? Was it Chu Qingge or Ningcheng? Where did they get this golden needle from? Han Yunqi was too lazy to ponder the question any longer. If the other side wanted to frame her, why wouldn't they have enough evidence? "Han Yunqi, tell me, is this needle yours or not?" Duanmu Yao asked loudly. "Yes. When did you steal something from me? Give it back to me." Han Yunqi was even more self-righteous than her. "You." Duanmu Yao got angry every time she spoke to Han Yunqi. She was about to die from anger. "You used a needle to poison my imperial mother. What else do you have to say for yourself? Duamu Yao asked again. You stole my needle and accused me of poisoning you. What do you think I have to say for myself? Han Yunshi retorted. Han Yunshi, you're still quibbling. Duamu Yao was about to spit out blood. Today you brought a needle and accused me of killing your imperial mother. Tomorrow you brought a hidden needle and accused me of killing your entire family, right? Han Yunshi asked again. Silence fell upon the scene. No one dared to interrupt. Duanmu Yao was so angry that her breathing grew ragged as she gasped for breath. The coroners already found out that my mother was poisoned to death. Moreover, there are people in the Chu clan army who saw you appear around the barracks that night with their own eyes. Both the witnesses and evidence were present. If these witnesses and evidence were found by a third party, then Han Yunshi would indeed be guilty according to Cloud Realm Continent's laws. Unfortunately, these witnesses and evidence came from Duamu Yao's side, so it was highly suspicious that they were forged. Han Yunshi couldn't be bothered to argue with them about the validity of the witnesses and evidence. With Duanmu Yao's pestering nature, there was no point in arguing with them. She had long discussed a plan with Long Feiyi to kill two birds with one stone. They only needed to prove that the needle was a false accusation. There was no need to uncover the true cause of Empress Shue's death. As long as they could prove that the needle was a false accusation, then Duanmu Yao would naturally suspect the person who gave her the needle. Once her attention was diverted, the matter would have nothing to do with them. Which coroner did you find to conduct the autopsy? Han Yunshi asked again. Lin Su from the Peace Pavilion. Duanmu Yao replied loudly. The Peace Pavilion was a profit-making organization that provided all sorts of autopsy services to the imperial court and the common people. Lin Su could be considered the head of the Peace Pavilion and had a resounding reputation. I don't believe him, Han Yunshi said coldly. Unless you can find someone to do a new autopsy and prove that Empress Shui really did die from poison and that the needle was the cause, this Wang Fei won't admit it. Chu Qingge had put in plenty of effort on Duanmu Yao's side. She even bribed Lin Su to do the autopsy himself, so Duanmu Yao trusted Chu Qingge without a doubt. It doesn't matter. This princess wants you to accept it wholeheartedly. Duanmu Yao was brimming with confidence. Then find Western Zhou's former coroner from the justice courts, Chao Tong, Grand Coroner Chao. Han Yunshi said slowly, so that everyone present could hear her clearly. Everyone was frightened by her words. They couldn't help but suspect that Duanmu Yao was here to slander Han Yunshi. Western Zhou's justice courts would never favor Han Yunshi. They'd definitely tell the truth based on facts. Meanwhile, Grand Coroner Chao Tong was Cloud Realm Continent's #1 coroner. His skills at autopsies were top-notch, and his reputation was unquestionable. If Han Yunshi dared to invite him here, then it meant she wasn't guilty at all. Duanmu Yao laughed out loud. Han Yunshi, stop pretending. You know full well that Chao Tong's retired for years. There's no way you can invite him here. And if I can? Han Yunshi retorted. What a joke. Duanmu Yao still couldn't believe it. Chao Tong had solved many major cases for Western Zhou, but he'd retired for years due to personal reasons. Her imperial father had once sent the crown prince to invite him, but he'd failed. What was Han Yunshi to do? Grand Coroner Chao is already on his way here. He'll arrive in 2 days. Duanmu Yao, if you're still a filial daughter who wants to know how your imperial mother died, then hurry and bring her body here, Han Yunshi said seriously. Duanmu Yao finally realized she wasn't joking and was stunned. A frightening thought flashed through her mind. Could it be that Han Yunshi wasn't the culprit? Was she being used by Chu Qingge? The Chu clan was the real culprit? Duanmu Yao quickly recovered her wits. She refused to believe her own suspicions. She was certain that Han Yunshi was the real culprit, and that Han Yunshi was just scaring her. She said fiercely, Fine. 2 days later, I'll make you accept it wholeheartedly. A life for a life. 2 days later, Chao Tong really did show up at the Yaoshui estate. Han Yunshi had only been able to invite Chao Tong because Third Elder Shen of Medical City had helped her in secret. As an elder of Medical City, Third Elder Shen couldn't openly help Han Yunshi, so Chao Tong didn't reveal his relationship with Third Elder Shen. Instead, he claimed to be an old official of Western Zhou and vowed to investigate the cause of Empress Shue's death. Princess, don't worry. This one definitely won't let esteemed Empress die in peace. Chao Tong continued to call Duanmu Yao princess with sincerity. Duanmu Yao's resolute heart wavered again. She nodded and said, "My imperial mother's body is right there in the courtyard at the end of the alley. Let's go." Everyone followed Chao Tong out, with Long Fei Yi and Gu Qi Sha accompanying Han Yunqi. Gu Qi Sha murmured, "Did you bribe Chao Tong?" Han Yunqi murmured back, "It's already good enough that we managed to invite him. You can't bribe him. Then aren't you afraid that he'll reveal the truth?" Gu Qi Sha grew alarmed. After all, it wasn't Han Yunqi who killed Empress Shui, but Long Fei Ye's men. His title as the world's #1 coroner wasn't just for show. Where did Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi get their self-confidence from? What medicine were they selling in their gourds? Chapter 658. Han Yunqi hadn't bribed Chao Tong, but wasn't she afraid that he'd expose the truth? Gu Qi Sha wasn't the only one puzzled. Ning Cheng was curious as well. He knew Chao Tong couldn't be bribed, and he was certain that Long Fei Ye's men had killed Empress Shui. Where did Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi get their confidence from? After Empress Shui's death, Chu Tianyin had found plenty of coroner's examiners to examine her body, but none of them were able to find the true cause of death. What was the real cause of death? Were Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi so sure that Chao Tong wouldn't be able to find out the truth? Ning Cheng's gaze was fixed on Han Yunqi's back the entire time. His lips curved into a mischievous grin. Even when Han Yunqi's figure was swallowed up by the crowd, he still wanted to see more. He disguised himself and blended into the crowd, accompanied by a few servants in disguise. They were all puzzled. His Highness Duke of Ning had plenty of work to do, so why had he traveled non-stop for 2 days and 2 nights just to come to Yaoshui himself? The Bailey Trade Consortium had urged him multiple times to attend Ningjing's wedding, but he'd refused every time. It wasn't like he could show his face in person, so what was the difference between watching the crime scene and sitting in the palace waiting for news? Empress Shui's corpse was placed in the courtyard at the end of the alley. Duanmu Ya wouldn't go so far as to reveal her mother's corpse to the public, so all unrelated people were kept outside the gates. Ning Cheng and a few of his retainers silently left the crowd until their figures vanished from the rooftops. Empress Shui's body was placed in the center of the courtyard, preserved in a specially made coffin. Duanmu Yao stood by the coffin, her face ashen and sorrowful. She still regretted not leaving the mountains sooner to save her mother. She'd held on to her father's hopes in the past, believing that he loved her mother so dearly that he'd do anything to save her. But reality proved that her father still loved his country more than anything else. The Chu clan was the main culprit behind her mother's death. Once she dealt with Han Yunqi, she wouldn't spare anyone from the Chu clan, including Chu Qingge. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Duanmu Yao carefully opened the coffin. Other than Long Fei Yi, who did not move, everyone present came forward to take a look. Long Fei Yi was not afraid of this kind of thing. He just did not like it. It had been almost 2 months since Empress Shui had passed away. If not for the low temperature at the end of winter and early spring, coupled with the nourishment of medicine, her corpse would have already started to wax. Although it had been nourished with expensive medicinal herbs, and the corpse did not emit a strange smell, nor did it show any signs of liquefaction, it had long been deformed. Its face and hands were covered with livor mortis, and the degree of decay in its body could not be seen with the naked eye. Only a professional would be able to tell how badly the corpse had decayed. Chao Tong only glanced at the corpse, a hint of helplessness in his eyes. He wasn't in a hurry to examine it, so he asked, "Princess Yao, may I take a look at that golden needle first?" "Of course." Duanmu Yao carefully handed the needle over. "There's still poison on the tip. Be careful." Chao Tong held the golden needle and examined it carefully. "What kind of poison is this?" Before Duanmu Yao could speak, Han Yunqi cut in. "It's sky scorpion poison. It doesn't matter if you touch it. As long as you don't get stabbed, you won't be poisoned." Duanmu Yao gave a cold snort. "So you still remember?" Han Yunqi was too lazy to argue with her. Han Yunqi knew that Duanmu Yao wouldn't believe her no matter what she said. She had invited Chao Tong here so he could speak up for her. "Where did you find this needle?" Chao Tong asked next. "From the bottom of her foot. Chu Qingge had told Duanmu Yao all this. So, Princess Yao believes that Empress Shui died from poison? Chao Tong asked seriously. Yes, it was Han Yunqi who used this needle to poison her. Duanmu Yao didn't forget to point out Han Yunqi's identity. She spoke as if she'd seen it with her own eyes. Chao Tong nodded and asked, Princess Yao, this one doesn't recognize poisons, so I specially brought a poison doctor with me. Would it be possible to let him in? Chao Tong's reputation were there. Even if Han Yunqi had invited him here, Duanmu Yao trusted him enough to agree without a second thought. The poison doctor examined the needle, then Empress Shui's foot. This is sky scorpion poison, he said seriously. Anyone poisoned by it will die within 3 steps. Han Yunqi, you're still trying to quibble? Duanmu Yao raged. Han Yunqi snorted disdainfully and didn't answer. The poison doctor hurriedly explained, Princess Yao, this one can only confirm 2 points. Firstly, the poison on the golden needle is scorpion poison. Secondly, Her Majesty the Empress Foot was poisoned by the needle and was indeed poisoned. As for whether esteemed Wang Fei died from sky scorpion poison, this one, poison doctor said as he looked awkwardly at Chao Tong. Chao Tong waved his hand, indicating that he could leave. Grand Coroner Chao, what do you mean by this? Duanmu Yao didn't understand. To reply, Princess, esteemed Empress Shui's passed away a long time ago. There's no point in examining her body, Chao Tong said tactfully, but everyone understood his meaning. Generally speaking, there was no point in examining a corpse after 7 days of death. No matter how well Empress Shui's body was preserved, it was impossible to examine it. Princess Yao, from the evidence we currently have, it's very likely that esteemed Empress Shui died from poison. However, because there's no way to conduct an in-depth examination, this one can't come to a conclusion, Chao Tong said seriously. Duanmu Yao knitted her brows. What did you say? Chao Tong was still serious. Princess Yao, esteemed Empress Shui was indeed poisoned, but this one can't confirm whether she died from poison. I hope Princess Yao will reconsider and not wrongly accuse a good person. Let the true culprit go. Duanmu Yao's gaze turned complicated. She looked suspiciously at Han Yunqi, but Han Yunqi didn't say anything and allowed her to look. It was unknown what Duanmu Yao was thinking, but after a while, she said angrily, what else can't you confirm? The evidence is irrefutable. It was her. Yes, it was me. I'll admit it, all right? Han Yunqi suddenly said impatiently. Duanmu Yao was very surprised, but Chao Tong was angry. Esteemed Wang Fei, if you want to admit your guilt, why did you invite old man here? What do we do now that the autopsy isn't conclusive? The golden needles were indeed mine, and there were needle wounds on the soles of my feet. If I don't admit it, who will? Han Yunqi shrugged helplessly. Esteemed Empress, old man just said that there was poison in the body. Although there were signs of poisoning, there was also physical evidence. However, we can't confirm whether esteemed Empress Shui died from poison, and we can't find any other cause of death, so we can't come to a conclusion. Do you understand? Chao Tong was a little anxious. Why didn't these 2 women understand even after he'd explained twice? One was Western Zhou's princess, a celestial mountain disciple, and the other was Qin Wang Fei. They weren't stupid. Seeing that Han Yunqi didn't say anything, Chao Tong asked again, Esteemed Wang Fei, do you understand? Third Elder Shen had helped him a lot, and this was the first time he'd asked him for help. He couldn't be a hindrance. Moreover, he'd been doing autopsies all his life and hadn't found a single case that was unjust, false, or wrong. This time, he had to make an exception and preserve his integrity in his later years. He couldn't make a hasty decision just because he couldn't do the autopsy. This was an autopsy, not a matter of one or the other logic. I understand, but it's a pity that some people still don't understand. Sigh, some people are stupid. Han Yunqi smiled. She didn't say who was stupid, but Duanmu Yao immediately admitted it. She snorted. Who says I don't understand? Great Coroner Chao, if you can't find any other evidence, then you can prove that she's the murderer. Don't you understand this logic? Duanmu Yao actually retorted to anger Chao Tong. Chao Tong's mouth twitched. He could tell that Qin Wang Fei wasn't stupid. As for whether Princess Duan was stupid or not, he was at a loss. I don't understand. Chao Tong shook his head. Duanmu Yao said seriously, "How can you not understand such a simple logic? If the murderer isn't Han Yunqi, why would the golden needles be stabbed under my imperial mother's feet? Could it be that someone framed her? After my imperial mother died, they added another needle?" Long Fei Yi was the first to laugh at her words. Of course, he wasn't laughing because of Duanmu Yao, but because of Han Yunqi. Without a doubt, Han Yunqi had been waiting for Duanmu Yao to say it herself. Gu Qisha and Mu Ling were secretly amused as well. Chao Tong was the only one who laughed out loud. "Princess Duan, you're right. If the needle was added later, then we might have jumped to conclusions today. The real murderer will probably laugh at us." Duanmu Yao gave a start, frightened by her own words. If Chao Tong or Han Yunqi had said those words in the beginning, she might have denied them immediately. But now that she'd said it herself, she couldn't help but think it over. When she recalled Chao Tong's words and Han Yunqi's reaction, her resolute heart wavered again. She muttered to herself, "Chu Qingga, Princess Duan, we can't let esteemed Empress die with grievances." Chao Tong said, "It's just a single needle. This Wang Fei won't accept it even if I admit it." Han Yunqi said coldly. Duanmu Yao glanced at Han Yunqi before relenting. "Then what do you want to do? We can't do an autopsy now. Princess Duan, old man has an idea, but..." Chao Tong was in a difficult position. "Go ahead and say it." Duanmu Yao said seriously. "Old man remembers that there's a wondrous medicine in the world called rising from the dead." Before he could finish, Duanmu Yao grew agitated. "Rising from the dead? You're thinking too much. Rising from the dead is a heaven-defying medicine that can restore a corpse to its original state in a short period of time. But once the time passes, the corpse will turn into a puddle of blood. In other words, there won't even be bones left." Mu Ling was the one to explain. She knew all the wondrous medicines in the world. "No wonder you're a genius from Medicine City. My apologies for my lack of manners." Chao Tong smiled and bowed. I don't dare. Mu Ling was very modest as she turned to Duanmu Yao. "This medicine is hard to come by. It's hard to find it in such a short time. According to this one's understanding, this medicine comes from Medicine City's medicine hut." Chao Tong looked towards Han Yunqi and tried to sound her out. "I wonder if esteemed Wang Fei..." Han Yunqi cut him off before he could finish. "What's there to be afraid of? As long as the medicine hut has the medicine, this Wang Fei will definitely ask master for it." Chao Tong gave a start, a little lost. He wasn't trying to test esteemed Wang Fei's courage, but whether or not esteemed Wang Fei could beg the king of medicine for rising from the dead. Why was esteemed Wang Fei so agitated? Duanmu Yao saw Han Yunqi's agitation. She didn't want to believe that Han Yunqi wasn't her mother's murderer, but Han Yunqi's actions had shaken her heart again and again. Had she really framed Han Yunqi? Had she really been played for a fool by Chu Qingga? Duanmu Yao's mind was in a mess with these two questions. "Princess Duan, then, should we use this medicine or not?" Chao Tong asked seriously. Chapter 659. Should she use the medicine of resurrection or not? Duanmu Yao's gaze finally returned to her mother's corpse. She hesitated. Empress Shui was already miserable enough. If her body didn't exist, she would never be able to rest in peace. In the silence, Chao Tong sighed deeply. Even as a coroner, he faced corpses every day, but he couldn't bear to see such a thing happen. After a while, Duanmu Yao asked in a choked voice, "Great Coroner Chao, is there no other way?" Chao Tong shook his head helplessly. "There's no other way." Duanmu Yao fell silent again. For some reason, Han Yunqi couldn't bear it. It wasn't for Duanmu Yao, but for Empress Shui. After all, Empress Shui was innocent. Han Yunqi couldn't help looking at Long Fei Yi, but saw that Long Fei Yi's eyes were cold and unmoved. This man's heart, how cold could it be? Even though he was always warm, she hadn't forgotten his cold-bloodedness and heartlessness. What would Duanmu Yao think if she found out the truth one day? Suddenly, Duanmu Yao's resolute voice broke Han Yunqi's train of thought. "Use the medicine. If we can't find the real culprit, we won't be able to rest in peace even if we bury the corpse. What's the use?" She looked at Han Yunqi and snorted. Han Yunshi, you have to do what you say. If you can't get the medicine of resurrection, then you'll be the one who killed my mother. Han Yunshi didn't answer her. Instead, she ordered men, send a messenger hawk to the medicine hut and ask for the medicine. With that, the matter was put on hold for the time being. It only took half a day to send a messenger hawk from Yaoshui to the medicine hut and back. Duanmu Yao had no intention of leaving. Han Yunshi didn't have that much time to accompany her. She and Long Fei went back to rest first. Ning Chung sat in a corner of the roof, watching Han Yunshi's figure disappear at the end of the alley. He was still in a daze. Master, I'm afraid. There's something fishy going on, one of the attendants murmured. Ning Chengshi lazily rose to his feet and stretched. Then he asked seriously, Say, what do you think Han Yunshi's hiding in her head? The attendants were left speechless. How should he know? Master, if Duamu Yao suspects Chuchinga, then we... Another attendant reminded him. What's the rush? Even if you suspect them, you'll only suspect the Chu clan. Ning Cheng had left the Chu clan with a trick up his sleeve. The medicine hut's medicine hut. But the medicine huts, medicines to medicine. But the decoction ants, the medicine huts, and hun. To medicine hut, SB. Han Yunshi asked Mu Linger in a low voice, Is there really a particular way to use this medicine? As far as I know, there isn't. Once it's cooked, just pour it over the corpse, Mu Ling murmured back. Senior pill fiend, is that right? That old thing, the king of medicine, wants to use this chance to lure you all over. Gu Qi Sha revealed the truth. Han Yunshi had no choice. She was busy dealing with Duanmu Yao, so she could only ignore the king of medicine's plans for now. In any case, the king of medicine couldn't do anything to her even if he lured them over. What if the king of medicine starts making conditions again by the time we get there? Mu Ling said worriedly. She'd heard of Han Yunshi's trip to Medicine Hut before. That's too much of a loss of face for me as his disciple, isn't it? Han Yunshi teased. If he dares to do that again, I'll ask that old man from medicine requesting cave for help. As Han Yunshi spoke, she glanced at Gu Qi Sha from the corner of her eyes. Gu Qi Sha hadn't said a word this entire time. Before sunset, Han Yunshi had already told Duanmu Yao and Chao Tong the news. Neither of them had any objections. They made some preparations, mainly strengthening the defenses to prevent Empress Shui's corpse from deteriorating. The next day, Duanmu Yao woke up bright and early. She invited Chao Tong to sit in her carriage before rushing to Long Fei Ye's side courtyard to wait for them. Who knew that even after waiting for a long time, Han Yunshi and Long Fei Yi still hadn't come out. Duanmu Yao couldn't bring herself to lose face, so she had Chao Tong knock on the door. After asking around, she found out that Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi had left late last night. Why did they leave first? Chao Tong was helpless. Esteemed Wang Fei said that when you arrived in Medicine City, you should go directly to the Council of Elders. Someone will bring you to the Medicine Hut, the servant said seriously. Chao Tong didn't ask any questions, but returned to the carriage to see Duanmu Yao's face turn gloomy. It was obvious that Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi didn't want to travel with her. Actually, Ning Cheng was hiding in the shadows as well. He'd come early in the morning to wait for them, but hadn't seen anyone either. Master, Miss Jing's wedding date has been set, so there's no time. In a few days, the Tang clan will come to propose marriage. The wedding will be at the end of the month, the servant reported. Miss Jing and young Master Nuo have already been arguing for 2 days. Miss Jing refuses to stay at the Tang clan for a full year, so young Master Nuo has asked you to go back and preside over the situation. How troublesome. Ning Cheng was impatient, but he still returned to Cloud Realm Trade Consortium. He couldn't be careless about the Tang clan's affairs, so he wouldn't allow Ning Jing to act recklessly. Follow Duanmu Yao and the rest. Report to me immediately if anything happens. He was about to leave when he added, Keep an eye on that needle for your lordship. The servant was bewildered, but didn't dare to ask. By now, Han Yunshi and the rest had already traveled an entire night and were far from Yaoshui Prefecture. Gu Qi Sha and Mu Ling hadn't followed them. Mu Ling had been very excited to see the medicine hut for herself, but after learning that Gu Qi Sha wasn't coming, she decided to stay behind in Yaoshui Prefecture. Gu Qixia only said, "What does it have to do with this old man?" Before deciding not to come, Han Yunqi didn't pursue the matter, while Long Fei Yi seemed to have guessed something, but didn't ask. Long Fei Yi was currently reading a letter from the Tang clan about Tang Li's wedding. Has Cloud Realm Trade Consortium made any progress in planting medicinal ingredients in northern Li's snowy mountains? Long Fei Yi asked. Not yet. I'm afraid they've been delayed by Ning Jing's wedding. Chu Shifeng replied from outside the carriage. Keep a close eye on them. Long Fei Yi was still very concerned about the matter. After all, it would directly affect Han Yunqi's position at Pilfiend Pharmacy. Han Yunqi didn't take the matter to heart. As she saw it, even if Cloud Realm Trade Consortium really did manage to grow the medicinal ingredients, she only needed to tell Medical City about it, and they'd be unable to sell their products. She was more concerned with the matter at hand. Long Fei Yi, just how did Empress Shui die? Han Yunqi still didn't know the truth. She knew that Long Fei Yi had sent men to kill Empress Shui, but she didn't know the cause of death. She assumed it was an assassination, but there were no obvious wounds on the body. The Chu clan and Ning Cheng must have done an autopsy as well, but they probably didn't find anything. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made a wound on Empress Shui's foot, but poisoned the original wound instead. Long Fei Yi leaned lazily against the high pillow as if dozing off. Han Yunqi scooted over and pushed him. Tell me, why are you so sure that Chao Tong won't be able to find anything? Aren't you afraid that the corpse will give you away? Long Fei Yi reached out and pulled her into his arms. That's not important. The results weren't important. What mattered was the process and Duanmu Yao's opinion. Tell me, it's not like I'll betray you. Han Yunqi wouldn't give up until she knew the truth. Long Fei Yi still didn't speak. Han Yunqi narrowed her eyes and said threateningly, "Are you going to tell me or not?" Long Fei Yi still shook his head. Han Yunqi suddenly tickled him under the armpit, but Long Fei Yi quickly dodged and dropped her hand. Only Han Yunqi knew that his greatest weakness was being ticklish. Han Yunqi wouldn't give up and kept tickling him. "Are you going to tell me or not? Are you going to tell me or not?" Long Fei Yi only dodged silently at first, but he couldn't help but laugh out loud. Still, he was stubborn and wouldn't tell her. The two of them began to make a ruckus inside the carriage, their movements loud and clear. Amidst their laughter were Han Yunqi's gasps for breath. Outside, Uncle Gao and Chu Shifeng exchanged glances, their imaginations running wild over the events in the carriage. An autopsy to prove one's innocence was a big deal. News of their trip to the medical hut had already spread, so all of Cloud Realm continent was paying attention, but the two of them were still in the mood to play around in the carriage. Would Duanmu Yao lose her mind if she found out? After a few days of travel, Han Yunqi's group arrived at the medical hut. Pilking did not make things difficult for them as they had imagined. Instead, he took out the rising dead pill and enthusiastically expressed his willingness to help them with the medicine. Han Yunqi mused that this old thing must have really learned his lesson. "Yunqi, did you read the ancient medicine tome I gave you last time?" The king of medicine asked with a chuckle. "I did," Han Yunqi replied. She was busy cultivating the second level of the poison storage space, so where would she find the time to study ancient texts? She'd leave it to Mu Ling and Gu Qixia to study, while she flipped through Mu Ling's notes. Then, "Is there anything that you don't understand?" the king of medicine asked. He'd given the ancient medicine tome to Han Yunqi so she could write letters to him and ask for his guidance. That way, master and disciple would gradually get to know each other better and solidify their master-disciple relationship. Since he couldn't force this girl to stay, he was more than willing to be her master. I'm still reading. I'll think about the parts one don't understand. It won't be too late to ask after I understand them," Han Yunqi said half-heartedly. After chatting a bit more, she went to visit the old man at Medicine Requesting Cave. Compared to the king of medicine, Han Yunqi liked the old man more. Unfortunately, he refused to see her because he had no good news. He was waiting for his disciple to return. Han Yunqi couldn't help but feel angry at Gu's smiling eyes. No matter how much she pitied the old man, she'd never betray Gu. Han Yunqi and Long Fei Yi rested at the medicine hut for half a day before Duanmu Yao and Chao Tong were brought over by the Council of Elders. The king of medicine examined the corpse and immediately brewed the medicine himself without saying a word. Chao Tong greatly respected the king of medicine. He was already so old, but he acted like a little follower, following the king of medicine around and helping him. On the other hand, Han Yunxi, the disciple, stood on the sidelines and watched with folded arms. Truly, truly outrageous. It was also here that Duanmu Yao finally believed that Han Yunxi had been accepted as a disciple by the king of medicine. Her already bad mood worsened. After all, the status of a disciple of the king of medicine wasn't low. Aside from being Qin Wangfei, Han Yunxi had another identity to show off? Duanmu Yao hated the feeling of being pulled closer. Soon, the king of medicine finished brewing the medicine and personally came over to administer it. Chapter 660. The medicine of resurrection was indeed worthy of its reputation. This name was not given blindly. As more and more of the medicine was sprinkled, the corpse gradually recovered. Before long, the corpse had returned to its original state. Aside from a slightly greenish complexion, it was no different from a sleeping person. Those who didn't know better might actually think that Empress Shui had come back from the dead. Everyone was stunned by the effects of the medicine. Even Long Fei was secretly shocked. There were many things that couldn't be accomplished by martial arts, but medicine could create miracles. Chao Tong's brows furrowed as he watched the corpse slowly recover. He had seen the secret hidden in the corpse at a glance. This case could be said to be half solved. He shook his head in disbelief. At this time, everyone was still shocked by the effects of the medicine and didn't notice his reaction. The medicine of resurrection will only last for 4 hours. After that, the corpse will turn into a pool of blood and not a single bone will be left. Girl, what do you want to examine? Hurry up. The king of medicine only had eyes for Han Yunxi. If not for Han Yunxi, he wouldn't have let this group of people into the medicine hut so casually. Great Coroner Chao, hurry up. Han Yunxi was calm and didn't look like a suspect. Duanmu Yao had been observing her all this time. Although she didn't want to believe it, the more she looked at Han Yunxi, the more she felt that Han Yunxi didn't look like the murderer. Duanmu Yao was irritated and stopped looking at her. Cold, she said, Great Coroner Chao, the cost of restoring the corpse is not small. You must be careful. If there's any mistake, you should know the consequences. Princess Duan, there's something this one must tell you first. Chao Tong said seriously. Is it more important than the autopsy? You only have 4 hours and you want to waste it? Duanmu Yao was angry. Unexpectedly, Chao Tong said, This matter is as important as the autopsy. Princess Duan, you must know. Please come over here. Duanmu Yao stood at the head of the coffin, while Chao Tong stood at the bottom. Why did he want her to come over? Duanmu Yao walked over suspiciously. What are you trying to say? Can't you be more direct? For hours isn't. Before she could finish, Duanmu Yao abruptly shut her mouth. She followed Chao Tong's finger and saw that the wound on her mother's foot had disappeared. The wound on Empress Shui's foot, was caused by a golden needle. It wasn't obvious at first, but due to the poison, it had turned bluish-purple. When the coroner had removed the needle, it had caused a second injury, so the wound had become obvious. Now, how could it disappear? How? Duanmu Yao couldn't believe it. She moved closer to take a closer look, but she still couldn't see a wound. The bottom of Empress Shui's foot was smooth and white. There wasn't the slightest trace of injury. Impossible. I don't believe it. Duanmu Yao turned to look at Han Yunxi again. This time, Han Yunxi was looking back at her, her eyes clear and bright. Even if she knew who the real culprit was, there was nothing to feel guilty about. What did Long Fei Ye's murder have to do with her? She just didn't understand why Chu Qingge and Ning Cheng wanted to make things difficult for her. If they couldn't find the cause of death, they could have faked a sword wound to pin it on Long Fei Yi. Princess Yao, this is precisely what I wanted to tell you. The rising dead drug will restore a corpse to its original state. After death, any traces of the body will be erased. Thus, Duanmu Yao had figured this out before the drug was administered. She seemed to have lost all strength as she muttered to herself. So my imperial mother didn't die from a poison needle? That's right. Chao Tong was very certain. Princess Yao, this needle was stabbed into esteemed empress's foot after she died. The person who used the needle was extremely skilled. If it wasn't for the rising dead drug, this one would have had a hard time proving that the wound on esteemed Empress's foot was caused after she died. You suspected it long ago? Duanmu Yao demanded. Yes, Qiao Tong was very frank. Then why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you explain? Why? Duanmu Yao was about to cry. Why didn't you say anything earlier? If you did, my mother wouldn't have been reduced to ashes. Why? Princess Yao, this one only suspected. If I wanted proof, it would only be in theory. I don't think you'd believe me anyway. Now that you've seen it with your own eyes, this one won't explain any further. Qiao Tong replied honestly. Duanmu Yao was so angry that she almost drew her sword and killed him. But she had to admit that he was right. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she wouldn't have believed anyone's excuse for Han Yunqi's crimes. Han Yunqi had been framed, and the needle had been added? So all the evidence in her hands was fake? Who else could have killed her imperial mother besides Chu Chinga's group? What a Chu Chinga! She actually dared to play me like this. She wanted to use me against Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi? No way. Hatred turned into strength as Duanmu Yao's eyes turned red. Qiao Tong, why aren't you inspecting the corpse yet? Just how did my imperial mother die? You have to give me an answer. The corpse had already begun to change, showing signs of hardening like other corpses. Qiao Tong quickly took out a pile of small tools and put on a pair of gloves to examine it. Although time was limited, Qiao Tong still carefully examined the corpse from head to toe, not missing a single detail. Silence fell upon the courtyard as everyone's attention rested on Qiao Tong's hands. Han Yunqi was still a little nervous right now. If Qiao Tong really did find out something, she and Long Fei Yi would really be smashing their own feet with a rock. As time trickled by, livor mortis began to appear on the corpse. Qiao Tong knitted his brows as his eyes focused. He seemed to have discovered something as he lifted his head to glance at Han Yunqi and Long Fei Yi. Everyone waited, expecting him to speak, but he didn't. Instead, he lowered his head again. Just how is it? Duanmu Yao couldn't wait any longer. Qiao Tong glanced at the time before revealing an awkward expression. Princess, this one still hasn't figured out the cause of death. There's still time, so this one will do his best. More than 2 hours had passed, but they still didn't know how she died. How were they supposed to find other evidence? Duanmu Yao grew angry. Qiao Tong, what are you saying? How can you not figure out the cause of death? What kind of world's #1 corner are you? Princess Duan, take a look for yourself. There's no sign of any injury on the Empress body, Qiao Tong explained. If it was so easy to figure out, why would I need you? Duanmu Yao retorted. Qiao Tong had no choice but to shut his mouth. This wasn't the first time he'd encountered a situation like this, but it was the first time he was so pressed for time. He had to seize the moment. Han Yunqi was also sizing up the corpse, her heart filled with bewilderment. She'd already eliminated the possibility of external injuries, and there was no sign of poisoning. Could it be that she died of illness? Some deaths due to illness couldn't be found in a short period of time, let alone ancient autopsy techniques. Even modern medicine couldn't figure it out. Princess Duan, this one is certain that esteemed Wang Fei didn't die from external injuries or poisoning. There's only one possibility, which is that she died of illness. May I know if esteemed Wang Fei had any previous illnesses? Qiao Tong asked seriously. My imperial mother's health has always been good. She would occasionally catch a cold, but there's no way she'd die of illness. Someone must have killed her. Duanmu Yao was agitated. Although she'd been away from her imperial mother for a long time, they'd still exchanged letters. She was very familiar with her mother's condition. Princess Duan, this one can't rule out the possibility of someone using esteemed Empress's illness to murder her. If we want to figure out the cause of death, I'm afraid we'll have to. Qiao Tong hesitated, but didn't finish his sentence. After all, he was facing the corpse of Western Zhou's Empress. After all, Emperor Kongcheng had been negotiating with the Chu clan troops and Tianning's Prince Regent to return the Empress's corpse and hand over the true culprit. Although the Empress was dead, she was more important than alive. Afraid of what? Tell me, Duanmu Yao asked anxiously. Qiao Tong was still hesitating when Han Yunqi spoke up. I'm afraid we'll have to dissect the corpse. From what Han Yunqi knew, ancient coroners only did superficial examinations. It was surprising that Qiao Tong dared to dissect the corpse to find out the cause of the illness. Impossible. Duanmu Yao refused without hesitation. She could accept the bones dissolving into a puddle of blood, but she couldn't accept dissecting the corpse. She would never allow her imperial mother to suffer such humiliation after her death. Princess Duan, if we don't dissect the corpse, I'm afraid we won't be able to find out the true cause of death, Qiao Tong said helplessly. Are you sure you'll find out if we dissect the corpse? Duanmu Yao retorted coldly. Qiao Tong admitted honestly, I can't be certain. Duanmu Yao glared at him, but had no strength to argue. She knelt by Empress Shue's corpse as tears streamed down her cheeks. She regretted it. He was thoroughly regretting it. She didn't dare to believe Chu Qingga's lies. She shouldn't have caused such a ruckus. Imperial Mother's corpse was about to disappear. How was she supposed to explain things to Imperial Father? She was hoping to borrow the strength of Celestial Mountain to force the Chu clan and the Duke of Ning to investigate the cause of her Imperial Mother's death. Then she could bring her body back to Western Zhou. How would she have the face to go back now? All of this was Chu Qingga's fault. Qiao Tong didn't give up just because he couldn't figure out the cause of death. His attitude was as earnest as ever. Princess Duan, although we can't confirm esteemed Empress's cause of death, we can at least prove that Qin Wangfei wasn't the one who killed her. The Chu clan's motives for accusing Qin Wangfei of murder are worth considering. Who else could it be but them? Chu Qingga, Ning Cheng. This princess can't exist under the same sky as you. Duanmu Yao gritted her teeth. She imagined that Chu Qingga must be laughing at her right now. Qiao Tong didn't give any conclusions, while Han Yunqi didn't speak up to explain herself. Just like that, Duanmu Yao was convinced that the Chu clan was behind the murder. She wished that none of this had happened at all, that she could be smart enough to see through Chu Qingga's schemes. Unfortunately, the truth was right before her eyes. Abruptly, a strange sound came from the corpse. In a flash, Empress Shue's corpse dissolved into a puddle of blood and water. Not even her bones remained. Imperial Mother, Yao Yao has let you down. Let you down. Duanmu Yao wailed as tears streamed down her face. Although Han Yunqi knew the truth, she still couldn't sympathize with Duanmu Yao. It's good that Empress Shue's gone like this, she thought. The real culprit was standing right by Han Yunqi's side. He stood there with his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes as cold as ice the entire time. He seemed like a heartless bystander standing outside the scene. Han Yunqi took his hand and murmured. Chapter 661. Han Yunqi asked in a low voice, Long Fei Yi, what's the real cause of death? Internal injuries, Long Fei Yi muttered back. Internal injuries. Han Yunqi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Just what happened? Using internal energy to injure the 5 viscera without leaving any marks on the surface. Once the chest is cut open, everything will be clear at a glance, Long Fei Yi said. How can it injure the 5 viscera without leaving any marks? That's not something a normal person can do, right? Han Yunqi asked. Only Celestial Mountain's internal energy can do it. Long Fei Yi replied honestly. Han Yunqi finally realized how dangerous the situation had been. If Duanmu Yao had been a little more ruthless and had Qiao Tong cut open the chest, the truth would have been revealed. Anyone who knew Celestial Mountain's internal energy arts was either Long Fei Yi himself or one of his subordinate swordsmen. This was what it meant to kill without spilling blood. Han Yunqi's heart was filled with emotions. After a long silence, she asked, Long Fei Yi, Empress Shui is innocent, right? Her status makes it impossible for her to be innocent, Long Fei Yi replied. Han Yunqi wanted to retort, but didn't know how. She asked, then what about her status as Qin Wangfei? Long Fei Yi looked at her with furrowed brows. What are you thinking about? A general's success is built on the bones of 10,000. How many skeletons are piled up for the glorious throne? Han Yunqi sighed with emotion. It's destined to be piled up with thousands of skeletons. The only difference is whether or not the person sitting on the throne can start a golden age so that Cloud Realm continent will no longer suffer from famine, war, or displacement. As Long Fei Yi spoke, His gaze flickered to the sobbing Duanmu Yao kneeling on the ground. His eyes were as cold as ever, devoid of sympathy or pity. After circling around in such a big circle, everything was still under his control. Ning Cheng and Duanmu Yao could fight it out. Han Yunqi had almost forgotten how big this man's heart was. At this moment, she remembered. She interlocked her fingers with his. Long Fei, I'll accompany you. Long Fei tightened his grip on her hand without a word. Before he left, he walked up to Chao Tong and questioned, "Where are the golden needles?" As soon as Chao Tong took out the golden needle, Long Fei snatched it away. "Return it to its rightful owner." Chao Tong looked up at Long Fei. Other than smiling, what else could he do? This needle originally belonged to the Princess Consort, so it should be returned to its rightful owner. Besides, even if it wasn't esteemed Wang Fei's, he had no choice but to give it to His Highness Duke of Qin. Return it to its rightful owner. Han Yunqi smiled and reached out to Long Fei. "From today onwards, anything you lose belongs to your lordship. Don't even think about getting it back." Long Fei was very unhappy. Han Yunqi was resentful, but didn't dare to fight with him. She felt that she should be more careful in the future so she didn't cause any more trouble. Long Fei wrapped the needle in a handkerchief before putting it in his sleeve. Han Yunqi knew that this misophobic fellow would definitely wash the needle multiple times when he got home. Duanmu Yao wanted to kneel on the ground and cry, but Han Yunqi and Long Fei were already preparing to leave. To them, this matter was basically over. The only thing they could be sure of was that Chu Qingge and Ning Cheng had forged evidence to deceive Duanmu Yao. That made them the biggest suspects. Han Yunqi thanked Chao Tong before preparing to leave with Long Fei. The King of Medicine quickly chased after her with a chuckle. "Lass, aren't you going to stay for a few more days?" The King of Medicine's tone made it sound like they were very familiar with each other. Because the King of Medicine had once wanted to keep Han Yunqi at the medical hut, Long Fei no longer had a good impression of it. Before Han Yunqi could speak, Long Fei asked coldly, "Is there anything else?" The King of Medicine didn't have a good impression of Long Fei either. He had long guessed that if it wasn't for Long Fei, Han Yunqi might have agreed to stay with him at the medical hut. Still, the King of Medicine was a shrewd old man. He wasn't stupid enough to offend Long Fei in front of Han Yunqi. He was still smiling kindly. "It's nothing important. Be careful on the road. Lass, you should take a look at that ancient medical book of yours." I will. I'm reading it already." Han Yunqi might have been half-hearted, but her attitude was better than before. At least she wasn't so hostile to the King of Medicine anymore. Chao Tong saw this with his own eyes and heart. He knew that Han Yunqi was the King of Medicine's disciple, but never expected Han Yunqi to be so impudent in front of the King of Medicine. This lass really didn't know how lucky she was. If the King of Medicine hadn't been willing to take out the rising dead, she wouldn't have been able to escape punishment so easily. She was really too impudent. The King of Medicine watched as Han Yunqi and Long Fei left. He was grinning from ear to ear. He didn't mind Han Yunqi's impudence at all. Han Yunqi's attitude towards him this time was clearly much better than the last time. He thought that he had done well as a master. To be able to take in such a genius as Han Yunqi as his disciple, he didn't wait at the medicine hut for nothing all these years. The King of Medicine returned with a chuckle. The moment he saw Chao Tong and Duanmu Yao, he immediately resumed his serious expression and didn't smile. "You're still not leaving?" He rudely chased them away. Chao Tong hurriedly bowed. "Senior, sorry for the disturbance. This one will take his leave." Duanmu Yao was still crying, immersed in her sorrow. Chao Tong was about to leave and felt really bad about it, so he came back to persuade her. "Princess Duan, you should leave. Don't hurt your eyes from crying." "Princess Duan, let's go. You can only avenge esteemed Empress after you recover, isn't that right?" The word avenge successfully roused Duanmu Yao's fighting spirit. She rose to her feet and said coldly, "Chu Qingge, Duanmu Yao, swear that I won't rest until I get my revenge." Around 3 days after Chao Tong and Duanmu Yao left the medicine hut, news spread throughout Cloud Realm continent. Because of Chao Tong's participation, Western Zhou's Emperor Kongqing had no doubts. He angrily dispatched troops to the west of Fenglin Prefecture to warn Ning Cheng that if he didn't hand over the Chu clan troops, Western Zhou would wash Tianning in blood to avenge the Empress. Duanmu Yao pulled herself together again and led a group of celestial mountain swordsmen to push an empty coffin filled with blood to the gates of Western Liang's imperial city. She wanted Chu Qingge to meet her outside. In any case, Western Zhou and Tianning were at daggers drawn and on tense terms. Ning Cheng had been busy teaching Ning Jing a lesson at Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's headquarters, but rushed back to Western Liang as soon as he heard the news. As soon as he saw Chu Qingge, he raged. "What are you doing? What did you promise your lordship in the first place?" Ning Cheng was no fool. If Chu Qingge hadn't told him that she'd found a reliable person to fake the wound, he wouldn't have acted rashly. Chao Tong didn't find out that the wound was fake. They used the medicine hut's miracle medicine to restore the corpse. Chu Qingge explained hastily. "Ning Cheng, just who killed Empress Shui? Just how did she die?" Ning Cheng gave Chu Qingge a cold look. He didn't want to waste any more words with this woman. If Empress Shui hadn't been killed by Long Fei Ye's men, they would have found the cause of death long ago. They hadn't found the cause of death or the true culprit, but they'd succeeded in convincing Duanmu Yao that he and the Chu clan were the culprits. Now that the corpse was gone, he and the Chu clan were set to take the blame. "Ning Cheng, what do we do now? Emperor Kongqing's looking like he'll really start a war," Chu Qingge said anxiously. Ning Cheng didn't answer. He wasn't worried about Emperor Kongqing, but Duanmu Yao. Long Fei Yi had done all he could to sow discord between Duanmu Yao and the Chu clan for a reason. The central regions of Cloud Realm continent were home to the aristocratic families, the eastern regions were home to the merchants, and the western regions were home to the Jianghu. The three-way battlefield spanned thousands of li and was home to many factions of the Jianghu. Now that they'd offended Duanmu Yao, they'd offended Celestial Mountain as well as half of the Jianghu. That was a lot of trouble. While Ning Cheng was lost in thought, a eunuch rushed in. "Your Highness Duke of Ning, the Ministry of War has sent word that the 3 batches of military grain from three-way black market have all been robbed." Ning Cheng grew alarmed. Where were they robbed? Eternal Space Mountain. They were robbed as soon as they entered, the eunuch replied. Eternal Space Mountain was the territory of the Eternal Space faction. Besides themselves, who else would dare to rob the goods passing through their territory? Ning Cheng slammed a fist on the table and said coldly, "Pass down my orders. All military supplies are to be on guard against the Jianghu's forces. And also, contact Carefree City and the City of Daughters. Have their young lords come see your lordship and tell them there's something we need to discuss." The eunuch hastily left with his orders. Chu Qingge's face was ashen. "Ning Cheng, if we start fighting with Western Zhou and Duanmu Yao joins in, then won't we?" Before she could finish, Ning Cheng cut her off coldly. "Don't worry. It was the Chu clan who killed Emperor Shui. It has nothing to do with Tianning." He was clearly planning to hand over Chu Tianning. Chu Qingge understood. She hesitated as if she wanted to plead on Chu Tianning's behalf, but in the end she said nothing. She always remembered that it was Chu Tianning, her father, and her uncles who'd arranged for her to end up where she was today. She'd been ruthless to herself for so long, so how could she show mercy to anyone else now? She smiled and said, "Handing over Chu Tianning and the Chu clan troops isn't a bad choice. In any case, the Chu clan's driving arrow archers don't have much fighting power left." Ning Cheng ignored her and prepared to leave when he suddenly remembered something. He turned back and asked coldly, "Where's your lordship's item?" "What item?" Chu Qingge was lost. "The acupuncture needle." Ning Cheng said coldly, "Don't tell your lordship that you lost it." Only then did Chu Qingge remember. She felt helpless as well. I that thing, I told Duanmu Yao about it, but lost it?" Ning Cheng didn't want to hear her explanation. Chu Qingge didn't even dare to see Duanmu Yao, so how was she supposed to know where the item had gone? She had no answer. "You better find it back, or else your lordship will hand you over too," Ning Cheng said coldly before leaving without looking back. "You, Ning Cheng, what do you mean by this?" Chu Qingge was furious. She chased after him for a few steps, but couldn't catch up. "Am I not even worth one of Han Yunqi's needles?" "Ning Cheng, What do you want that acupuncture needle for? As soon as Ningqing left, he found the same guard from before and asked coldly, "Where's the item?" To reply, "Master, this subordinate couldn't get close to the medicine hut, so I don't know who has the item," the guard reported. Ningqing's face was gloomy. After a while, he asked, "Can you find another one?" The guard looked troubled. He was about to reply when a warm voice spoke up. "Duke of Ning, what time is it now? You're still thinking about Han Yunqi's acupuncture needle? What do you want to do?" Looking in the direction of the voice, they saw that the person who had come was Chapter 662. Looking towards the source of the voice, they saw a dignified newcomer with an extraordinary bearing. This was none other than Ning Cheng's little sister, Emperor Tianhui's youngest noble consort, the current grand concubine Ningyan. Unlike Ning Jing's shrewdness, Ningyan was a reserved and mature woman. Although she was Ning Cheng's little sister, she looked more like an elder sister. Chu Qingge was the Empress Dowager, while she was the grand concubine. Although Chu Qingge's clothes were extravagant and luxurious, Ning An's were plain and simple. She had the bearing and dignity of a head of the imperial harem. She was quiet by nature, but not an obedient person. She'd hidden herself in Emperor Tianhui's harem for years and occupied the position of noble consort. She didn't fight for it, kept her mouth shut, and never caused any trouble. "It's so late, but you're still out for a stroll?" Ningqing asked. He treated Ning indifferently from Ning Jing and Ning Nuo because Ning's steadiness made him feel completely at ease. "I came specifically to find you. I heard about Empress Shui's affairs," Ningyan said. "It's nothing major. I had no intention of keeping Chu Tianyin around," Ningqing said. Although he was reluctant to part with the Chu clan troops, he wouldn't leave someone he couldn't trust by his side for the sake of an army. He'd been keeping an eye on Chu Tianyin over the past few days. Although he hadn't found anything suspicious, he still couldn't stop worrying. He couldn't bear to give the Chu clan troops to Long Feiyi for nothing, either. So handing them over to Western Zhou and destroying them was the wisest choice. Ningyan drew closer and looked at him seriously. "Even the Duke of Qin can't mess up your plans. Why did you lose your temper over a single needle?" "My subordinates didn't do their jobs well, so your lordship was simply teaching them a lesson," Ning Chang said coldly before turning to leave. "Really?" Ningyan asked. "It's getting late. You should go back and rest. You should plan well about what I told you last time. Your lordship doesn't want her to live past this year," Ning Chang instructed coldly. "I've already made arrangements for that," Ningyan pressed. "What do you want that needle for? You still have a plan?" Ning Chang finally lost his patience. "Do your job well. I don't need to explain my business to you." "Big brother." Ning Chang was anxious. Unfortunately, Ning Chang ignored him and strode away. Ningyan couldn't help but shake her head. Ever since her parents passed away, she and her brother had worked together to support the world. In the past, whether it was the Chamber of Commerce or the various affairs of the clan, Big Brother would always look for her to discuss. This was the first time her brother had been so rude to her. How could she have the ability to control him? "You're getting more and more despicable," Long Feiyi said. "I've always—" Han Yunqi came to her senses halfway through her sentence and looked over disdainfully. "There's nothing I can do about it. Those who get close to ink are stained black." Uncle Gao almost went astray when he heard their conversation. It was rare for these two masters to only use their mouths instead of their hands. From what he could tell, His Highness Duke of Qin was at a disadvantage. Although they were chatty, they still had to talk business. The fate of the Chu clan lies in Chu Tiannin's hands. "Life and death are in his hands," Long Feiyi said. Chu Tiannin was in the most difficult position. Not only did he have to face the enmity of Emperor Kongcheng and Duanmu Yao, but he also had to face Ningcheng's suspicions and Long Feiyi's test. If he wanted to kill his way out of these three predicaments, he had to make a choice. It all depended on what he left behind and what he gave up. Long Feiyi was still looking forward to Chu Tiannin's actions. After all, he was the one who'd thrown Tianning into chaos. Chu Tiannin would probably make a move within the next few days. Han Yunqi suddenly asked, "Long Feiyi, why did Chu Tiannin think of seducing you?" Although there were no eternal allies or eternal enemies, Chu Tianyin wouldn't go so far as to seek Long Feiyi out. Long Feiyi was at least half responsible for the Chu clan's current predicament. Because no one can help him besides your lordship, although Chu Tianyin had been persuaded by Gu Beiwei, Long Feiyi's words were the truth. A few days later, Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi returned to the Yaoshui estate. They'd just gotten out of the carriage when Chu Shifeng came to report, "Your Highness, esteemed Wang Fei, Chu Tianyin has admitted his crimes." Admitted his crimes? Long Feiyi didn't understand. It counts as a confession. He admitted that he was the one who killed Empress Shui and said that if Western Zhou wants to invade Fenglin Prefecture, they'll have to go through his Chu clan troops first. Chu Shifeng reported. What's he singing now? Han Yunxi was lost. If she hadn't known beforehand that Chu Tianyin was planning to rely on Long Feiyi, she would have believed that he was loyal and devoted to Ning Cheng. Ning Cheng hadn't even tried to shift the blame, but Chu Tianyin had taken it all on himself. Interesting, let's wait and see. Long Feiyi was intrigued. After eating some food in the courtyard, Han Yunxi hastily went to bathe and catch up on sleep. Long Feiyi naturally headed for Gu Beiyue's quarters. Did you give Chu Tianyin the idea? Long Feiyi asked. Gu Beiyue shook his head. If he can't even solve a problem like this, there's no need for your highness to keep him around. Long Feiyi was waiting for this answer. He sat down and poured himself a cup of tea. Gu Beiyue smiled. Your Highness Duke of Qin, is there anything else you want to discuss? Long Feiyi wouldn't sit down unless he had something important to discuss. Every time, he'd leave as soon as he finished speaking without another word. Your dantian is damaged, so why was it able to reflect this prince's true qi? Long Feiyi had been wanting to ask this question for a long time, and he just happened to have some free time today. This one has been pondering over it these past few days, but unfortunately, Gu Beiyue sighed. He didn't explain much, only saying indifferently, a doctor doesn't treat himself. So be it. Hand, Long Feiyi said. Gu Beiyue was slightly taken aback, but he quickly extended his hand. He hadn't expected Long Feiyi to take his pulse for a second time. Long Feiyi felt for a long time, but couldn't find anything. Suddenly, he grabbed Gu Beiyue's hand and placed their palms together, once again transferring true qi to Gu Beiyue. Not long after, the true qi was reflected back. If Long Feiyi hadn't been sitting so steadily, he probably would have been flung out long ago. Last time, it had happened so suddenly that Gu Beiyue didn't seriously feel it. This time, he closed his eyes and seriously felt the changes in his dantian. Long Feiyi didn't disturb him, drinking tea while waiting. Gu Beiyue seemed to have discovered something and tried to circulate his qi. At first, it went smoothly, but after a while, he spat out a mouthful of blood, his whole face turning pale. What's the situation? Long Feiyi asked. Gu Beiyue looked at him for a long time, then said seriously, this one's dantian, perhaps it can be saved. Why do you say that? Long Feiyi was surprised. When he was injured, he had a blood clot in his dantian, seriously injuring his dantian and crippling his inner qi. Now, it seemed that it wasn't the case. Now, it didn't look like a blood clot, but more like a qi clot. Blood clot and qi clot could both cause serious injuries to the dantian, but the consequences were different. Maybe it's because the true qi clot in the dantian, causing the qi to not flow smoothly and unable to circulate. Gu Beiyue said seriously. Long Feiyi was an expert, so he understood immediately. Gu Beiyue's true qi and inner qi might not have completely disappeared, but it could be because the true qi clot in his dantian, causing his inner qi to be unable to circulate. If the true qi was allowed to flow smoothly, there was a possibility that the dantian could recover, and once the dantian recovered, the inner qi could be restored. The thing that's resisting this prince's true qi is that clot of qi? Long Feiyi asked. It's very likely. Gu Beiyue's eyes revealed joy. It was fortunate that he could stand up. If he could recover his inner qi and the shadow technique, that would be extremely fortunate. If I lose it, it's my fate, but if I gain it, it's my fortune. Long Feiyi's eyes flashed with a touch of complexity, and he asked lightly, how sure are you that you can recover? Dissolving the blood clot wasn't difficult for Gu Beiwei, but the true qi and inner qi were completely lost, so the blood clot didn't have much of an effect. If there was a qi clot, the true qi and inner qi would still be there, but it was clotted and suppressed. Once it was unblocked, the true qi would cover the body, and the true qi would nourish the dantian, and the inner qi would recover in a few days. Unblocking the blood clot shouldn't be difficult for Gu Beiwei, right? Gu Beiwei didn't answer Long Feiye's question, but smiled and asked, "If this one recovers, will your highness still be at ease with this one?" Chapter 663. If Gu Beiwei recovered his shadow arts, would Long Feiye still be able to control him? Long Feiye's reply was, "If you need any good medicine, let your lordship know." So speaking, he rose to leave. Gu Beiwei watched Long Feiye's retreating form with emotion. In the end, I didn't choose the wrong person. At this moment, Lil Thing slipped out from the side and jumped onto the tea table. It still didn't know that the gentleman had a chance to recover his martial arts, but was waiting for the day to come. Gu Beiwei held Lil Thing in his arms and gently scratched its chin. His voice was as gentle as water as he asked, "Comfortable?" "Very comfortable." Just hearing his voice was soothing, much less being caressed. Lil Thing's expression was intoxicated, as if it had fallen into a pot of honey. What made it happiest was seeing the gentleman and Papa Long coexisting peacefully. Like this, it could watch over both the gentleman and Mama Yunshi without having to separate. "All right, go play by yourself. Be good." Gu Beiwei gently set it down, not forgetting to scratch its little ears. "Go on." But Lil Thing's legs gave way and it fell on its butt. He was so gentle that its legs went soft. How could there be such a warm man in this world? Hungry? Gu Beiwei smiled, his smile as mesmerizing as the warm sun. Lil Thing rolled off the table and slipped away. If it stayed any longer, something even more embarrassing would happen. Gu Beiwei didn't know what was wrong with Lil Thing, but he didn't take it to heart. Since there was a chance to recover his martial arts, he'd be busy in the coming days. Silence reigned in the Yaoshui estate as Long Feiye and Han Yunshi waited for Chu Tiannin's show while worrying about Tang Li's marriage. Ning Cheng, who'd been unmoving this entire time, finally couldn't sit still. Neither Duanmu Yao nor Emperor Kongqing believed Chu Tiannin's words. Duanmu Yao specifically asked Chu Qingge to come out and meet her, while Emperor Kongqing wanted Ning Cheng to withdraw his troops from Fenglin Prefecture and publicly apologize. "Chu Tiannin, what did you say to Emperor Kongqing?" Ning Cheng asked coldly. Chu Tiannin stared straight into Ning Cheng's furious eyes. "I was the one who killed Empress Shui. If Western Zhou dares to invade Fenglin Prefecture, they'll have to go through my Chu clan army first. Just say that. If your Highness Ning Wang doesn't believe me, you can ask the people in the tent. When I wrote the letter, many people saw it." The people around Chu Tiannin were all arranged by Ning Cheng, and had long since reported this matter to him. He was rather surprised that Chu Tiannin would take the initiative to admit his guilt. Back then, he had wanted to push all the blame onto Chu Tiannin and was worried that Chu Tiannin would refuse. "Emperor Kongqing isn't satisfied with handing you over? What else does he want?" Ning Cheng icily said. "Your lordship's handing you over is giving him a way out. If he wants to go to war, your lordship isn't afraid of him. This one finds it strange as well. If your Highness Duke of Ning doesn't believe me, then I have nothing to say. You can do as you please." Chu Tiannin sighed helplessly. "Duke of Ning, this one took the initiative to take the blame in order to clear your name. After all, Empress Shui was imprisoned in the Chu clan army this entire time. Neither you nor the Empress Dowager had anything to do with this matter. I never expected them to still cling on to you and the Empress Dowager. As this one sees it, Emperor Kongqing and Duanmu Yao don't just want to avenge Empress Shui, do they?" Ning Cheng grew alert at these words. "What do you mean?" Chu Tiannin's 3 words immediately convinced Ning Cheng that he was referring to the Long Tianma. As this one sees it, Emperor Kongqing will use this chance to join forces with Long Tianma to attack Tianning from the east and west. Their target isn't this one or you, but the Empress Dowager and the young emperor," Chu Tiannin said in a low voice. When he saw Ning Cheng's dark expression, he continued, Emperor Kongcheng will use Empress Shui's murder as an excuse to launch a punitive expedition against Tianning. Long Tianma will use the excuse of Quang Zhengji to eliminate the demon Empress Dowager and the young emperor. It's perfectly justified for the two of them to join forces. Ning Cheng glanced at his deputy general and asked, "Has there been any movement from Long Tianma's side?" Tian has been mobilizing troops ever since the western regions fell into chaos. They haven't made a move yet, but they're ready to make a move at any time, the deputy general replied. Ning Cheng narrowed his eyes and looked at him from the side. His expression was dark and callous as he rubbed his chin, his entire body emanating a dangerous aura. If Chu Tianyin hadn't mentioned it, he would have forgotten about Long Tianma. After some hesitation, he said, "Let's wait and see. Your lordship will see what they're planning." Then this one. Chu Tianyin trailed off. Ning Cheng smiled coldly. "What difference does it make whether you admit to those crimes or not? As long as your lordship doesn't let go, what can Emperor Kongqing do to you?" Without a doubt, Ning Cheng wouldn't release the Chu clan troops. Once Emperor Kongqing and Long Tianma started working together, every single one of his soldiers would be nervous. Chu Tianyin knew that he was safe for now. Chu Tianyin clasped his hands to hide the mocking smile in his eyes. "Many thanks to your Highness Duke of Ning." After Chu Tianyin left, an attendant came to report, "Your Highness Duke of Ning, the Empress Dowager is outside asking for an audience." That sounded laughable. The Empress Dowager wanted to see the Prince Regent, but she had to wait outside? But that was the rule in Tianning Palace. "I won't see her." Ning Cheng felt annoyed at the sight of Chu Qingge. 3 days later, Ning Cheng didn't give Emperor Kongcheng or Duanmu Yao any response. Emperor Kongcheng couldn't bring himself to lose face, so he angrily ordered 10,000 troops to attack Fenglin Prefecture. Just like that, war broke out again. Ning Cheng didn't fear Western Zhou's troops at first. Since he didn't have to worry about Northern Li, he wanted to concentrate most of his troops against Western Zhou and end the war quickly. But Chu Tianyin's reminder forced him to increase his guard against Tiannan country. He could only accompany Western Zhou and slowly fight while keeping an eye on the situation. Actually, Emperor Kongcheng didn't want to start a war, but Ning Cheng's attitude left him with no way out. When the Empress was kidnapped, he placed righteousness before family and refused to be threatened by the Chu clan troops. Now that the Empress was dead, he had to take a firm stance, or else both he and Western Zhou would lose face. Meanwhile, Long Tianma only looked like he was itching to make a move, but he had no intention of doing so. Now that Western Zhou and Tianning were at war again, Great General Mu finally nodded his head. With the slogan, "Kill the Demon Empress and revive Tianning," he sent out his troops to start a small skirmish in Tianning's east to keep Ning Cheng in check. At the same time, he expressed his goodwill to Western Zhou and expressed his willingness to continue the marriage alliance. In this way, Chu Tianyin's words to Ning Cheng were verified. It had to be said that Chu Tianyin was a genius. As for Duanmu Yao, she waited a few days without seeing Chu Tianyin, so she used Celestial Mountain's name to issue an edict to the Jianghu. She personally snuck into West Jing's imperial palace to assassinate Chu Qingge, but her internal injuries were too severe for her to hurt the woman. Still, Chu Qingge was frightened and on guard all day. She couldn't even sleep at night. In the end, Ning Cheng didn't understand Emperor Kongcheng and Duanmu Yao as well as Chu Tianyin. If only Ning Cheng had given Emperor Kongcheng a way out of the situation, things wouldn't have turned out this way. Unfortunately, Ning Cheng had fallen for Chu Tianyin's instigation. Chu Tianyin's given Ning Cheng big trouble. Gu Beiwei grinned. "Your Highness Duke of Qin, he's not a useless man, is he?" Long Fei got straight to the point. "Tell him that your lordship is definitely saving the Chu clan elders." Chu Tianyin was such a shrewd man that he'd be a disaster if he wasn't kept in check. Long Fei naturally had to keep the Chu clan elders in his hands. "Could it be that your highness already knows their whereabouts?" Gu Beiwei smiled faintly. Chu Yuni was the man who'd crippled his martial arts, but Gu Beiwei was still smiling at the mention of the man. It was hard to fathom. "The day of Tang Li's wedding is the best time to save them," Long Fei said. Gu Beiwei immediately understood. The Chu clan elders were probably imprisoned in Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's headquarters. In a few more days, the The consortium would hold a wedding, so it was a good chance to save them. Ning Cheng had imprisoned the Chu clan elders in Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's headquarters, which was the safest place. No one would think that the Ning clan had any connections with the consortium. If Chu Tianyin hadn't revealed the truth, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi would never have guessed that the Ning clan was the D clan of yesteryear. Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiwei both knew about the mystery of the D clan, but Ning Cheng was still skeptical of Chu Tianyin. It was likely that he still didn't know that his family's secret had been exposed. Within a few days, the battle lines at the border between Western Zhou and Tianning grew longer. Meanwhile, Tianning and Tianning were fighting fiercely in the east. Ning Cheng had no time to worry about Ning Jing's wedding. Meanwhile, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi had nothing better to do. Han Yunqi even had time to prepare a big gift for Tang Li. She and Long Fei Yi went to visit the Tang clan for the second time. The night before, Long Fei Yi received a letter from the old man in Qinzhou. It didn't mention anything about Empress Shui, but only asked how his body was doing and whether he'd recovered from his internal injuries. His master knew that he'd recovered from his insanity, which was why he'd written back. He didn't show the letter to Han Yunqi. Since his master hadn't mentioned Empress Shui, he'd just let it pass. By the time Han Yunqi and Long Fei Yi arrived at the Tang clan, Lady Tang and Aunt Ru had already prepared the betrothal gifts for the marriage proposal. There were 10 Tang clan assassination weapons in total. One of them was the pear blossom rain needles that had run out of needles, while the other 9 were just ordinary weapons. According to Cloud Realm Continent's customs, the groom would go to the bride's family to propose marriage. The groom's mother would have to bring along 2 characters and a fortune teller to confirm the date of the marriage. This was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to enter Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's headquarters. How could Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi pass it up? Lady Tang had long left 2 spots open for Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi to disguise themselves and go together. Unfortunately, Aunt Ru had second thoughts. As I see it, Yunqi shouldn't go. Han Yunqi looked at her doubtfully. Aunt Ru actually called her Yunqi. They weren't that close, were they? Before Han Yunqi could speak, Long Fei Yi asked, why? It's useless even if she goes. Why don't we have Chu Shifeng go instead? He can help when the time comes to save people. Aunt Ru's words weren't without reason. Han Yunqi didn't have the skills to help Long Fei Yi save the Chu elders. Frightened, Chu Shifeng quickly refused. No need, no need. This subordinate only needs to follow His Highness when the time comes. There's no need to familiarize myself beforehand. What a conscientious subordinate. Han Yunqi immediately forgave him for cursing her in the past. Aya, it's settled then. Everyone go rest. We'll leave first thing in the morning tomorrow. Lady Tang smoothed things over. Although she wasn't satisfied with her daughter-in-law, she was still very happy that her son was finally getting married. The crowd was about to disperse when Long Fei Yi stopped them all with a single sentence. Chu Shifeng, stay here and find out just who colluded with Duanmu Yao to reveal the location of the Yaoshui estate. Chapter 664. Someone's colluding with Duanmu Yao? Everyone was stunned by Long Fei's words. Tang Zijin, who'd been silent all this time, suddenly rose to his feet. Someone from the Tang clan? It can't be one of your lordship's men, right? Long Fei Yi retorted. Just what's going on? Tang Zijin had dearly hoped that Long Fei Yi would marry Duanmu Yao. That way, he could not only control Celestial Mountain's power, but borrow Western Zhou's strength as well. But even so, he was clear that they were destined to be enemies with Duanmu Yao. Chu Shifeng explained the entire situation to Tang Zijin and Lady Tang, who were both stunned. Compared to their own clansmen, they trusted Long Fei Yi's Yaoshui estate more. They wouldn't dare to collude with Duanmu Yao or reveal any information. After all, Long Fei Yi was a ruthless man when it came to disciplining his subordinates. The Tang clan, on the other hand, was more talkative. But there aren't many people who know the location of the Yaoshui estate. Lady Tang mused. Lock up everyone who knows and interrogate them one by one. I refuse to believe we can't get anything out of them. Tang Li pressed his tongue against his lips as he narrowed his eyes, emanating a dangerous aura. Are they tired of living by colluding with Duanmu Yao? Right, interrogate them one by one. We'll use that. What's his name? Lady Tang didn't remember, but Han Yunshi reminded her. Rat, right? Rat torture. That's the one. Lady Tang rejoiced and gave Han Yunshi a look that said, you know what I mean. We'll definitely get something out of them with rat torture. Aunt Rue stood on one side. Her lips pursed in a rare moment of silence. This is a big deal. It's better to kill the wrong person than miss the chance. Our Tang clan will never allow traitors to exist. Tang Zijin's expression was stern as he said sternly, Iru, don't go. I'll leave this to you. You and Chu Shifeng investigate thoroughly. No matter who it is, we won't tolerate it. Aunt Rue dearly wanted to go with Lady Tang to propose marriage, but the situation made her uneasy. She couldn't refuse. Aunt Rue, is there a problem? Long Fei asked. No. How could there be a problem? Aunt Rue hurriedly said, Tang Li's marriage is a big deal, but this is even more important. Don't worry. Leave this matter to me. Chu Shifeng, cooperate well. If there's any progress, report to me at any time. Long Fei instructed. This subordinate understands. Chu Shifeng acknowledged respectfully. Long Fei's tone and attitude weren't friendly at all. However, no matter what, Tang Zijin no longer dared to use his status as an elder to pressure him. Fortunately, the traitor incident didn't cause any major losses. Otherwise, even he, the sect leader, wouldn't be able to escape punishment. That night, Long Fei stayed in Tang Li's courtyard. In Tang Li's words, he was very nervous the night before the marriage proposal because he had to have a heart-to-heart talk with his elder brother, Long Fei. Han Yunshi stayed in Mrs. Tang's room. In Mrs. Tang's words, she was very excited the night before and had to find someone to plan some things with. As for Aunt Rue, Chu Shifeng had pestered her all night to investigate the traitor incident. She didn't get any rest at all. Early next morning, Han Yunshi and Long Fei put on the Tang clan's special human skin masks. Han Yunshi was disguised as Lady Tang's servant girl while Long Fei was a guard. The two of them stood on either side of Lady Tang, looking like a perfect match. Although it was just a marriage proposal, the procession was still quite impressive. It was lined up in front of the Tang clan gates, far surpassing Han Yunshi's honor guard when she got married. For guards led the way while Tang Li rode behind them on his tall horse. Behind them was Lady Tang's carriage, with Han Yunshi sitting inside with Tang Feijin. Long Fei rode beside the carriage to guard it. Behind them were the wedding nanny and fortune teller. The betrothal gifts were at the very back. Besides the 10 assassination weapons, there were also 10 carriages full of gold and silver. Lady Tang had only prepared 2 carriages as a formality, but Han Yunshi said, Cloud Realm Trade Consortium doesn't lack money. Neither does our Tang clan. No one else understood, but Lady Tang knew what she meant. Using her status as the clan head's wife, she bypassed the complicated procedures and ordered people to bring out 8 carriages from the storehouse. Everything was ready, and they were about to set out when Aunt Rue rushed down the mountain. Wait. Lady Tang lifted the curtains and looked over unhappily. It's the auspicious hour. What are we waiting for? We'll talk when we get back. Didn't we agree on 2 carriages of betrothal gifts? Why are there 10 now? Aunt Rue asked. Lady Tang wasn't good at managing money, so she didn't even know how much silver she had in her pouch. Aunt Rue was the one in charge of money. We'll talk when we get back. It's not good to miss the auspicious hour. Lady Tang said unhappily. It's just a marriage proposal, so what's there to look at the auspicious hour? If we bring so many gifts, those who don't know will think we care about that girl a lot. 2 carriages are enough as a formality. Aunt Rue was a miser. Han Yunshi sat in the carriage with her eyes closed. She didn't want to argue with Aunt Rue. I only have 1 son, and the Tang clan only has 1 young master. No matter what, his marriage can't be shameful. This betrothal gift is the face of the Tang clan and Tang Li. We can't lose it. It's settled. Men, let's go. Lady Tang was very decisive. Sister-in-law, didn't we already agree on this? Aunt Rue was anxious. Before Han Yunshi and Long Fei came, she and Lady Tang had been discussing this matter all day. From the marriage proposal to the wedding, to the marriage, and even how they would make things difficult for Ningjing when they had children in the future. She gave Lady Tang many brilliant ideas, and Lady Tang accepted them all. They were just about to propose marriage. So why did she change her mind? What did Han Yunxi and Lady Tang talk about last night? Even if we agreed, it can change, Lady Tang said in a low voice. Lady Tang said in a low voice, don't interfere in Tang Li's affairs. Hurry up and find that traitor. Otherwise, I won't be able to rest easy. With that, Lady Tang lowered the curtains and the carriage set off. Aunt Ru watched in a daze, and her heart became more and more uneasy. Although Mrs. Tang liked to argue with her on some small matters, she would still listen to her on important matters. Lady Tang didn't even tell her about the betrothal gift. Ever since her sister, Tang Yuan, passed away, she had taken over her sister's role in investigating the perplexing butterfly illusion. She didn't have any say in other matters of the Tang clan. After all, her brother and sister-in-law were in charge. Later, because Lady Tang was lazy and didn't care much, she helped her. As she helped, her power grew, and she even took control of the Tang clan's finances. Aunt Ru was dedicated to the Tang clan and East Qin, but she was still selfish. After being in power for so long, she was always afraid of losing it. She was already the second in command of the Tang clan. After Tang Zijin, she didn't want to fall to third or fourth. At first, she was wary of Tang Li's wife, worried that the future young madam would take her place and take over Lady Tang's affairs. After Tang Li and Ning Jing's marriage was confirmed, she secretly exhaled in relief. Ning Jing would never be able to win Lady Tang's trust, but she never expected Han Yunxi to stick her foot in. It looked like she had to find a way to deal with that woman quickly, both for public and private reasons. Han Yunxi's group traveled for 3 days before Cloud Realm Trade Consortium sent a guide to show them the way. After rushing north for a few days, they reached a large canyon. The further north they went, the thicker the snow. In the south, the grass was long and the orioles were flying. Flowers were blooming everywhere, making it seem like summer. But in the north, especially in the mountainous regions, it was still chilly and the ice was beginning to melt. Before entering the canyon, the guide stopped and whistled to summon a group of black-robed attendants. What's the meaning of this? Tang Li grew wary. Young clan head Tang, please don't blame them. They're here to lead the horses. Please cover your eyes. It'll only take an hour to reach 10,000 Commerce Hall, the guide said respectfully. They didn't want them to know the way into the canyon, did they? But they'd only come to propose the marriage today for the sake of the medicine. Their main goal was to scout the way. And if this young lord isn't willing? Tang Li asked coldly. He sat atop a tall horse, his eyes cold and disdainful. Although his snow-white robes made him look like an immortal, his expression was that of an ignorant and incompetent hedonist. The guide couldn't understand why President Jing had been so blind to take a liking to such a person. He didn't dare to slight his future son-in-law. Young Lord Tang, please calm your anger. These rules aren't aimed at you, but are set by Cloud Realm Trade Consortium. Anyone outside of 10,000 Commerce Hall, even if they're on our side, must be blindfolded when entering the canyon. I hope you'll forgive us. How big is this canyon? Do we have to walk for an hour? Tang Li's expression was impatient, but he was testing the waters. The guide was smart enough to answer. The mountain roads are difficult to traverse. Walk slowly and be careful. In other words, we don't need an hour if we're fast? Tang Li asked again. The guide avoided the question. Young Lord Tang, let's hurry into the canyon. President Jing and the rest are already waiting for us. She can't wait. Tang Li chuckled, his tone full of ridicule. The guide was furious. President Jing was such a good woman, so how could she be stuck in a pile of cow dung and humiliated like this? The guide almost couldn't take it anymore, but in the end he suppressed his anger and pretended not to understand. Patiently he urged, Young Lord Tang, let's go. Then let's go. Men, set out. Tang Li purposely ignored the blindfold, while Long Fei Yi watched from behind, mulling over the guide's words. Han Yunxi and Lady Tang, on the other hand, were laughing up their sleeves in the carriage. Tang Li was so good at acting that they even wanted to give him a good beating. The guide couldn't bear it anymore and ordered the black-clothed attendants to stand in front of the carriages. Young Lord Tang, I heard that your mother has asked someone to calculate the auspicious time for the two families to meet. If you delay any longer, I'm afraid that the auspicious time will be missed. Please blindfold yourself and follow me into the canyon." The guide's tone was heavy. "There are still 2 hours before the auspicious time my mother calculated. Didn't you just say that it only takes an hour to enter? What's the hurry? In my opinion, let's rest here for an hour, and then we can enter the canyon," Tang Li said and waved his hand. "Men, rest here. Bring me my wine." Should they go or not? The guide was eager to let these people go as soon as possible. President Jing wouldn't marry a playboy like Tang Li. However, he couldn't make the decision. Moreover, if he didn't take them to Wan Commerce Hall, it would be all his fault if his superiors blamed him. He sent someone back to report the situation here to President Jing, while suppressing his anger and patiently persuading him, who knew that no matter how he persuaded, Tang Li wouldn't accept blindfolded entering the canyon. Ning Jing was already in a bad mood, and after learning about this, her whole person was in a bad mood. Whether they come or not, don't rush them. I'd like to see how long they can wait and see who is begging whom, she ordered coldly. Chapter 665. After receiving Ning Jing's orders, the guide felt like he'd vented his anger. He stopped trying to persuade Tang Li and smiled. "Then young clan head Tang, you should rest first. We'll continue once you're not tired." So speaking, he sat down on a rock on the side, looking like he was determined to waste time with them. This, Tang Li's mouth twitched. Actually, he didn't mind wasting time, but Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi still had to rescue the 2 elders of the Chu clan. Tang Li glanced back at Long Fei Yi. It was up to them now. Long Fei Yi couldn't figure out much from the guide's answers. He had long sent people to follow them and familiarize themselves with the terrain, but they didn't know the situation inside the canyon. He was afraid that they'd alert the enemy if they followed them inside. Once Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's people were on guard, it'd be harder to rescue the 2 elders of the Chu clan. Thus, he had to use the most conservative method. Long Fei Yi coughed lightly, and Han Yunqi helped Lady Tang off the carriage. She didn't forget to secretly wink at him. Long Fei Yi's lips quirked up. Even if this woman was in disguise, she was still so mesmerizing when she blinked. Seeing his mother and Han Yunqi arrive, Tang Li continued his act. He quickly dismounted and shouted, "Mother, it's windy here. Why did you get off the carriage? Hurry and go back. Rest well. I'll have your daughter-in-law come pick you up later." Lady Tang glared at Tang Li before ignoring him and walking towards the guide. The guide quickly rose to his feet. "Lady Tang, this brother, my son doesn't know any better. I ask that you don't lower yourself to his level for my sake," Lady Tang said seriously. The guide was flattered and bewildered, but Lady Tang quickly stuffed a large ingot of gold into his belt. "Just pretend that nothing happened just then. Don't tell anyone about it either. Hurry up and bring the blindfolds. Let's enter the valley as soon as possible so that we won't miss the time." The guide touched the gold on his waist and knew that it wasn't light. He sneered in his heart. Young Master Tang didn't care about face, but Madame Tang still cared about it. If Tang Li continued to waste time here today, the Tang sect would be disgraced if word got out. "Madam, you're exaggerating. We didn't have anything to do just now. If you've rested enough, let's set off." The guide immediately gave in. Tang Li saw all of this. Although he did not understand the reason, he knew that there must be something wrong with the gold ingot. With his mother's temper, if he waited a little longer, she would probably turn back. Han Yunqi was really something. It had only been a few days, and she had already settled his mother? After dealing with his mother, would he still need to be afraid of his father? Thinking of this, Tang Li suddenly felt that he shouldn't think like this. Han Yunqi wasn't his wife, and it was useless to deal with his parents. With Long Fei Ye's protection, no one in the Tang sect would dare to bully her. "Why are you still here? If you miss the time, I'll punish you when we get back." Madame Tang scolded him fiercely when she passed by. Tang Li resentfully let the black-clothed servant put on the blindfold and didn't dare to say a word. The guide sneered at Tang Li's resentful appearance and whispered to the servant beside him, "Go and tell President Jing that young Master Tang is very afraid of Madame Tang. He's so afraid that he can't even fart. Madame Tang is afraid of missing the auspicious time. so she took the initiative to enter the valley. Would Tang Li be afraid of Madame Tang? In fact, Madame Tang was very nervous on the way back to the carriage. This was the first time she had yelled at Tang Li, and she couldn't bear to do it. After all, she had never raised her voice at Tang Li ever since he was born. She loved her son so much that her son's father was envious of her. After Tang Li and the others put on the blindfolds, the black-clothed servant led their horses forward. The guide secretly picked up the gold ingot at his waist, weighed it in his hand, and hid it in his sleeve with satisfaction. He didn't know until his death that it was this gold ingot that bought his life. The long line of marriage proposals soon disappeared into the canyon. The black-clothed servant was guarding the carriage, so Han Yunxi and Madame Tang couldn't talk for the time being. The two of them seemed to have endless things to talk about along the way, and they chatted day and night. Han Yunxi liked Madame Tang's temper, and Madame Tang liked Han Yunxi's character. Madame Tang secretly thought that if Han Yunxi wasn't Long Fei Ye's concubine, she wouldn't let Tang Li miss out on this daughter-in-law. More than half an hour later, the carriage stopped. The black-clothed servant took off their blindfolds and retreated. Han Yunxi lifted the curtains and saw that they were in the middle of a large garden. It was as large as Jiangnan's plum blossom garden. Could this be one of the gardens built in the canyon? Directly in front of them was a magnificent palace hall, resplendent in gold and jade, no less imposing than the imperial families. An old man dressed in soft, gold-threaded robes stood in front of the hall. When he saw Tang Li get off his horse, he slowly walked over. Tang Li's heart was filled with doubts. This old man's clothes were extraordinary, and his aura was extraordinary. The guide hurried forward to introduce him. Old master, this is the young head of the Tang clan, Tang Li, young clan head Tang. This is our President Jing's father, the old head of Cloud Realm Trade Consortium. Ning Jing's father? The head of the D clan? A complicated look flitted past Tang Li's eyes before he quickly bowed. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. For Ning Jing's father to come to an event like this without her mother, she must have passed away. Tang Li didn't care, so he didn't ask. At this moment, Han Yunxi arrived supporting Lady Tang. The old head was very gentlemanly as he hurried over to greet them. I presume this must be Lady Tang? Precisely. Old President Ouyang. Nice to meet you. Lady Tang was just as courteous. The two exchanged pleasantries for a while before the old head invited Lady Tang and the rest into the main hall. Han Yunxi accompanied Lady Tang inside while Long Fei Yi stood by the door. The old head was about to enter when he turned back to see Long Fei Yi standing by the door. He smiled and said, "Let's go in together. Old man's place is heavily guarded. Please be at ease. These are the rules of the Tang clan. Just let him stand by the door, it's fine," Lady Tang explained. The old head didn't say anything more and entered the main hall. Han Yunxi was the last one to enter. She deliberately glanced at the guide and found that he had left from the side. She thought she would see Ning Jing, but she didn't expect that there was no one else in the hall except for the maidservants. The marriage was a big event, the parents' order and the matchmaker's words. It was inappropriate for Ning Jing, the party concerned, to be present. However, this marriage was too special. With Ning Jing's temper and behavior, it would be abnormal if she didn't show up. Tang Li didn't see anyone around, so he was a little disappointed. Today, he came to propose marriage. He only needed to show up, but he couldn't say anything, so he just sat quietly aside. Lady Tang and the old head talked politely. It was nothing more than some pleasantries. After a while, they asked for Ning Jing's birth characters and asked the fortune teller to arrange the marriage on the spot. The fortune teller had arranged it in advance. No matter what the birth characters were, he would calculate the result that satisfied everyone. Han Yunxi was puzzled. Ning Jing was only 19 years old. She was younger than Tang Li by 3 years. She originally thought that Ning Jing wasn't young. A young lady who could take charge of the Cloud Realm Great Assembly wasn't simple at all. Putting aside all kinds of complicated relationships, Tang Li, a second-generation rich kid who didn't think about making progress all day, could actually make a profit by marrying Ning Jing. She sneaked a glance at Tang Li, wanting to mock him with her gaze. Who knew that Tang Li was distracted? The 28th of this month is an auspicious day. However, you must marry before noon. After noon, it's inauspicious. the fortune teller said seriously as he stroked his beard. The old head and Lady Tang both nodded without any objections. The fortune teller then talked about some taboo details. The two elders listened humbly and talked for more than an hour. Everything went smoothly. In the end, Lady Tang shot a look at the wedding nanny. Some things couldn't be said directly, so the nanny had to do the talking. The wedding nanny and old President Ouyang talked about the differences between their customs before finally bringing up the betrothal gifts. Old President Ouyang, these are the betrothal gifts from the Tang clan. There are 10 Tang clan assassination weapons and 10 carts of gold, silver, and jewels. The nanny patted the chest with a chuckle. The Tang clan is the most generous in-laws I've ever met. Leaving aside the 10 assassination weapons, just these 10 carts of gold, silver, and jewels are the best betrothal gifts in Cloud Realm continent. The Tang clan is full of sincerity. President Jing is very fortunate. At this moment, Ning Jing's lips curved into a disdainful smile. 10 carts of gold, silver, and jewels was indeed a large sum, but she didn't care for them. The wealth she controlled and contributed to Cloud Realm Trade Consortium every year was more than 100 or 1,000 times more than these 10 carts. She was more interested in the Tang clan assassination weapons, because her big brother had specifically told her to keep them. President Ouyang stood up and looked over the gold, silver, and jewels one by one before his gaze settled on the chest containing the weapons. The wedding nanny quickly opened it up and saw 10 smaller chests inside. She opened them one by one before introducing the pear blossom rain needles. This is the Tang clan's second-rank treasure and has always been in the young clan head's care. Today, we're using the pear blossom rain needles as betrothal gifts. It can be considered a token of young clan head Tang's sincerity. How considerate! President Ouyang's heart finally settled down. He was actually only Ning Jing's subordinate. Ning Jing had told him to put on a show and only told him to see the pear blossom rain needles, or else the marriage was off the table. Can I marry Ning Jing if I don't have a heart? Tang Li suddenly broke into a careless laugh. Those who didn't know better would think he was being frivolous, but Lady Tang and Han Yunxi knew that Tang Li's words had a deeper meaning. He'd already used up all the pear blossom rain needles, so all that was left was an empty shell without a heart. President Ouyang only smiled without answering Tang Li, but Ning Jing couldn't take it anymore. Ning Jing had already ignored this man, but his words made her look towards Tang Li. Seeing Tang Li's sitting posture and expression, as well as his tone of voice, she felt even worse. She could bear it when she heard her guide's report, but now that she saw this man's true face, she couldn't bear it anymore. How could she have been so blind back then? Besides his white robes, which part of this man looked like a banished immortal? Which part of him looked so handsome? How was she supposed to face him for an entire year? And she had to stay in the Tang clan. Ning Jing finally couldn't take it anymore. She walked out and asked coldly, Tang Li, if I say no, are you not going to marry me? Chapter 666. Just like the first time they met, she was dressed in a white male outfit and her hair was tied up with a hairband. She didn't wear any complicated hair accessories and looked neat and tidy. At first glance, she looked like a suave and handsome young master from a rich family, but at a closer look, one could tell that she was a girl. Her facial features were too distinctive. She was barefaced and clean. This was the first time Han Yunxi saw Ning Jing. Hearing about her was not as good as seeing her in person. She suddenly wanted to see how Ning Jing would look like when she got married with a phoenix coronet and robes. She would definitely be beautiful. However, Han Yunxi didn't overlook Ning Jing's calm and experienced aura. The more she looked at Ning Jing, the more she felt that Ning Cheng and Ning Cheng looked alike. She didn't know if it was because she knew about their relationship beforehand, or because the siblings really looked alike. Mrs. Tang was also meeting her future daughter-in-law for the first time. She whispered, "She looks like Li or..." Han Yunxi laughed secretly and didn't say anything. They sized up Ning Jing, but Ning Jing treated them as air. She only had eyes for Tang Li and walked towards him casually. Tang Li looked at this woman, and the scenes of that night flooded his mind uncontrollably. His ears were actually burning. Ning Jing stood in front of Tang Li and only then did Tang Li regain his senses. He wanted to stand up, but Ning Jing was standing too close to him and blocked his way. What was the meaning of this? She was going too far. Mrs. Tang couldn't stay calm and was about to speak when Han Yunqi pressed her shoulder to calm her down. Tang Li wasn't easy to deal with. He simply sat down and supported his head with his hand. He raised his eyebrows and looked at Ning Jing with a frivolous smile. "Long time no see. Did you miss me?" Ning Jing's hands that were hidden in her sleeves slowly clenched into fists. She almost punched him, but fortunately, she controlled herself. She looked down at him from above and asked coldly, "You haven't answered my question?" Tang Li asked with interest, "How did you know that I didn't bring my heart?" He placed one hand on his chest and hooked his finger at Ning Jing with the other. He smiled mischievously. "Come, I'll let you touch it. It's hot." In the silence, everyone present could hear the sound of Ning Jing's fist clenching. For the first time, Mrs. Tang knew that her son was so good at flirting with women. Han Yunqi's mouth twitched. She didn't know what was good about Tang Li. They had achieved their goal of exploring the path today, so there was no need for Tang Li to pretend anymore. It was best to finish the discussion quickly and go back to prepare for the wedding. If he wanted to tease Ning Jing, he would have plenty of time in the future. Why did he have to behave atrociously in Ning Jing's territory? Sure. Ning Jing smiled and leaned down. She placed one hand on the armrest of Tang Li's chair and reached for his chest with the other. Tang Li was stunned. He didn't expect that this woman would dare to do it in front of everyone. Tang Li's hand pressed firmly on his chest and didn't move. Ning Jing didn't touch his hand. Instead, she reached into his shirt and pushed Tang Li's hand away bit by bit. Tang Li's entire body tensed up. He was so nervous that he let go of his hand. Soon, Ning Jing accurately touched his chest. She pressed it lightly and her lips curled into a sneer. At this moment, everyone around them was on high alert. Even Han Yunqi, who didn't know martial arts, was frightened. In this situation, Ning Jing could kill Tang Li with just a thought. However, Tang Li didn't feel threatened at all. He stared blankly at Ning Jing and smelled the pleasant fragrance on her body. He didn't look at her seriously that night. Now that he looked at her up close, he realized that she was really beautiful. Han Yunqi pushed Mrs. Tang. Mrs. Tang quickly said, "Tang Li, don't be rude." Who was she teaching a lesson to? Tang Li finally came back to his senses. He quickly pulled Ning Jing's hand away and pushed her away without a trace. "It was just a joke. Jing-er, you don't mind, right?" Jing-er. Her parents died early, and the elders in the clan never called her that. What right did he have to call her that? Ning Jing's eyes flashed with disgust, but she smiled. "So it was a joke. So you don't want to marry me?" Tang Li was speechless for a moment. He didn't know how to answer her. Ning Jing laughed. "It was just a joke. Young Master Tang, you don't mind, right?" "Why would I?" Tang Li didn't want to argue with her anymore. When he married her into the Tang sect, he would see how he could subdue her. Cough, cough. "Ning Jing, don't be rude. Why don't you come and greet Mrs. Tang?" President Ouyang finally spoke. Ning Jing quickly turned around and bowed to Mrs. Tang. She was natural and graceful, respectful and not humble. "Get up quickly. Let me take a look." Mrs. Tang held back her anger and was very enthusiastic. She took Ning Jing's hand and looked at her seriously. "What a beauty. Suehua, don't you think so?" Suehua? Han Yunqi almost didn't realize that she was calling her. "Yes, yes. Young madam and young master are a perfect match," Han Yunqi said in a low voice. The wedding nanny also came over to praise them. Ning Jing just smiled and didn't say anything. The matters of the marriage proposal were basically settled. Mrs. Tang didn't want to stay any longer. After chatting for a while, she got up to leave. Ning Jing didn't go out to see them off. Tang Li stood at the door, looked back and said affectionately, "Jing-er, wait for me to marry you." Outside the door, the mountains were as dark as ink. Tang Li was a touch of white in the ink. His gentle smile was fixed in the ink painting and in Ning Jing's mind. This scene was Ning Jing's deepest memory of Tang Li in her life. After they left, Ning Jing began to count the betrothal gifts. She picked up the pear flower storm needles and pondered for a long time, but couldn't figure out how to use it. She didn't know if it directly activated the mechanism or if there were other procedures. Although she wanted to try activating the mechanism, she didn't dare to. She knew that the pear flower storm needles were the core, which meant that there was a limit to the number of needles hidden inside. This thing was what Ning Cheng wanted, so she shouldn't bother with it. She looked at the other hidden weapons, but she couldn't understand them. Come, give all these to the clan head. Be careful. If you break them, be careful of your heads. She checked the 10 carriages of gold, silver, and jewelry one by one. Each carriage had 10 boxes, so 10 carriages had 100 boxes. She estimated the value of these betrothal gifts. Miss, the Tang sect is so generous. That wedding nanny was right. This is definitely the best betrothal gift in the world. The servant girl smiled. Ning Jing glared at her with a straight face, and the servant girl immediately shut up. However, Ning Jing's lips unconsciously curled up slightly. She originally thought that the Tang sect wouldn't give any more betrothal gifts other than hidden weapons. She didn't expect them to give so many. The betrothal gifts were the face of the in-laws, but it was also the in-laws' respect for her. Her marriage to Tang Li was special, but no matter how strong Ning Jing was, she couldn't help but feel soft in her heart. After all, this was the only time in her life she would marry. Ning Jing felt a little nervous as she gently stroked the chest of betrothal gifts. She was really going to get married. At this moment, Ning Nuo walked out with a smile. Ning Jing, you received such a large sum of betrothal gifts. How will Cloud Realm Trade Consortium give you a dowry now? I said before, you don't need to worry about my affairs. Scram. Ning Jing hated Ning Nuo more than anyone else, not Tang Li. I just came to remind you that Lady Tang said there was no need for a dowry. The Tang clan can still support you. Ning Nuo reminded her. The Tang clan gave so many betrothal gifts that it's obvious they don't lack money. That mother-in-law of yours is very formidable. Ning Jing understood that if she didn't bring enough dowry, her mother-in-law would eat her alive. Someone come, bring me the list of names of Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's arms dealers. Ning Jing said coldly. Ning Cheng grew alarmed. What do you want to do? It's none of your business. Try spouting nonsense again. Ning Jing warned coldly. Ning Jing, I'm warning you now. If you give the arms dealers to the Tang clan, Big Brother won't forgive you. Ning Nuo grew serious. Who said anything about giving them away? Cloud Realm Trade Consortium accepted the betrothal gifts, but the dowry is mine to keep. The Tang clan's assassination weapons have never been leaked to outsiders. As I see it, this is a chance. Ning Jing mused. Perhaps she could sell some of the Tang clan's smaller weapons and weapons for a big business. This is a good idea. Ning Nuo understood her intentions. After Lady Tang's group left the gorge, they didn't go far before turning off their pursuers. Long Fei Yi and Tang Li sat in the carriage as well. With Ning Jing's personality, her dowry wouldn't be gold, silver, or jewels. Besides money, Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's most valuable assets are their shops. They have a very complete business chain in all trades. Han Yunqi analyzed. Ning Jing wouldn't marry into the Tang clan for nothing. If she wants to gain benefits from the Tang clan, she'll have to target their assassination weapons. The arms dealers are her first choice. The dowry is in her hands, so there's a risk. Be careful not to lose the Tang clan. Tang Li said. Although Cloud Realm Continent had gunpowder weapons, they were few and far between. Wars were still fought with cold weapons, so the arms dealers were a very sensitive trade. Ning Jing wasn't so stupid. Long Fei Yi patted Tang Li on the shoulder and said coldly, she's already yours. Can't you get her things? He was entrusting the heavy responsibility to Tang Li. Tang Li looked at Han Yunqi under pressure. Sister-in-law, is that so? What's mine is the Duke of Qin's, and what's the Duke of Qin's is mine. So what's mine is still mine. Han Yunqi grinned. Long Fei Yi didn't have any objections. Tang Li exhaled and leaned weakly to one side. He was at a loss. How should he turn Ning Jing's things into his? In a few more days, his carefree days would come to an end. Yunqi, that gold ingot? Lady Tang asked worriedly. Don't worry. That gold ingot will be a pathfinder. At the very least, it'll lead us to the entrance of the main hall. Han Yunxi's gold ingot had a lot of secrets. When the last day of the month came, Tang Li would come to marry his wife. She and Long Fei Yi would then come to rescue them. Over the next few days, they had another important task to take care of, and that was to ferret out the Tang clan traitor. After returning to the Tang clan, Long Fei Yi immediately found Chu Shifeng and Aunt Ru to understand the details of the investigation. There are still 10 or so people we haven't interrogated yet. The rest can be eliminated as suspects, Chu Shifeng replied honestly. And if we can't get anything out of those 10? Long Fei Yi asked. Chu Shifeng found himself in a difficult position. This subordinate doesn't know everything about the Tang clan, so I'll have to ask Aunt Ru for advice. Interrogate them first. As I see it, the traitor must be among those 10 or so people. If rat torture isn't enough, we can try something else. I don't believe there's anyone who doesn't fear death. Anyone who dares to betray the Tang clan will die. Unlike her previous silence, Aunt Ru was back to her usual ruthless and decisive self. A complicated look flickered past Long Fei Ye's eyes before he said coldly, "Bring the rest of the people here. Your lordship will interrogate them personally." The boy looked towards Han Yunxi and immediately fell to his knees. "Your Highness Duke of Qin, esteemed Wang Fei, besides us, there are a few other members of the Tang clan who know the location of Yaoshui Villa." As soon as these words were spoken, the entire place fell silent. Long Fei Yi, Han Yunxi, Tang Zijin, Lady Tang, Tang Li, Aunt Ru, and Chu Shifeng all knew the location of Yaoshui Villa. This child's words were very interesting. What words? Could it be that the Duke of Qin would sell himself out? Aunt Ru said as she raised a hand to slap the boy. Han Yunxi quickly grabbed her hand and demanded, "You're going to hit him before you get to the bottom of things? Do you want to beat him into a confession?" Aunt Ru viciously shook off Han Yunxi's hand and said coldly, "What kind of words is he saying? He's just quibbling. I think he's the most suspicious. Is there anything wrong with his words? He's talking about us, not just the Duke of Qin. The Duke of Qin wouldn't sell himself out, but the rest of us." Before Han Yunxi could finish, Aunt Ru laughed coldly. "Big brother, sister-in-law, hear that? She's suspecting us now. Yunxi can't mean that, right?" Lady Tang favored Han Yunxi, but not the boy. She looked at him loftily and said, "You still dare to quibble? Someone come. Slap him first." "Wait." Han Yunxi stopped her and was about to speak when Lady Tang grew unhappy. "Yunxi, you can't be suspecting me as well, right?" How was Han Yunxi supposed to reply? She suspected Aunt Ru, but there was no proof. Words were useless. "If even you're suspicious, then Big Brother and I won't be able to escape suspicion either." "Oh, that's right. There's Tang Li too." Aunt Ru feigned a helpless expression. Long Fei Yi hadn't spoken up this entire time because of this misgivings. Words were useless and would only alert the snake in the grass. Han Yunxi was very smart, but her soft-heartedness only made her stupid. Yunxi's meaning is to convince these people, right? Long Fei Yi spoke up. Han Yunxi nodded, knowing that she'd been impulsive. "We haven't even found the traitor yet, so how can they be convinced?" Aunt Ru said disdainfully. Long Fei Yi pretended not to hear and asked coldly, "What's your name?" "I'm called Kong Shi," the youth replied. "Who's in your family?" Long Fei Yi asked next. "What does he want to do?" Aunt Ru knitted her brows, a little uneasy. Han Yunxi and Tang Li, on the other hand, were puzzled. They couldn't guess Long Fei Ye's intentions. "My parents are already gone. There's only my grandmother left," Kong Shi replied honestly. "How old are you?" Long Fei Yi asked next. 7 more days until I'm 53. Kong Shi's eyes lit up at the mention of his grandmother. He hadn't gone back in days, so she must be missing him. Hearing this, Han Yunxi understood, but the poor youth still didn't. Long Fei Yi didn't ask any more questions, but ordered coldly, "Someone come, bring Kong Shi's grandmother here." Chapter 668. When the attendants brought in Kong Shi's grandmother, Kong Shi burst into tears. She was in her 50s and looked even older than her actual age. Her arms and legs were clumsy, so she had to be supported by others. She didn't recognize Long Fei Yi or Han Yunxi, nor had she seen the Tang clan head before. As soon as she saw the room full of torture instruments, she was frightened to death. She quickly fell to her knees and shouted at Han Yunxi's group, "Your Excellency clan head, spare my life. Spare my life. Did she do something wrong? If you spare him this time, this old woman will accompany you to death. This old woman will kowtow to you." She really did kowtow, each time loud and clear. "Grandmother, grandmother, I'm here, I'm here. Grandmother, I'm fine. You should go back, grandmother, go back. I'll be home tomorrow. You go back first." Kong Shi cried as he threw himself at Long Fei Ye's feet and kowtowed again and again. "Your Highness Duke of Qin, please let my grandmother go. She's innocent. She doesn't know a thing. Your Highness Duke of Qin, my grandmother can't bear this punishment. Please let her go. I confess. I'll confess to any crime." Kong Shi couldn't move Long Fei Yi, so he turned to Han Yunxi. "Esteemed Wang Fei, please be magnanimous. I was the one who did this. It has nothing to do with my grandmother. Can you take her away?" "She, just what did you do? Speak. Do you want to anger your grandmother to death? If she leaves, who'll save you? If she leaves, who'll save you?" Hearing this, Han Yunxi's heart sank. Does this old woman really think I can save this grandson of mine? She's too naive. However, the old lady was right. In this house, other than her, who else would truly love this young man? Who would truly protect him? "Someone come. Take the old woman away." Aunt Ru spoke up. "Fei, he's already confessed. Don't make things difficult for the old woman. She's old and can't take the torment." Unfortunately, no one dared to move. Aunt Ru personally walked over before Long Fei Yi spoke up. "Have you forgotten the Tang clan's rules? Anyone who betrays us will have their entire family wiped out." This was not a rule of the Tang sect, but rather a rule of East Qin. It had been a long time since anyone had mentioned this. Aunt Ru was stunned. Her face was as white as a sheet as she watched Grandma Kong kowtow to His Highness Duke of Qin. "Grandma, don't come over." Kong Shi rushed over, but Grandma Kong pushed him away. Grandma Kong mistakenly thought that the Long Fei Yi sitting on the main seat was Sect Master Tang. She knelt down and kowtowed, then took a step forward. "Honorable Sect Master, my Kong family only has one kid left. If you want his life, you'll have to take mine first. I don't know what she did wrong, but if you say he is wrong, then he is wrong. It's all because I haven't taught you enough." I. As the old granny spoke, she suddenly burst into tears. This old one has let down his parents. Kong Shi sat on the side and cried. The old granny suddenly raised her head, and then her head was about to hit the ground. Kong Shi was frightened and rushed over to hold her, sobbing, "No, no. Grandma, I did nothing wrong. Ashi didn't do anything wrong. Ashi is not a traitor. He's not. Woo, Grandma. Ashi was forced by others. Ashi has let you down." Hearing this, everyone present was shocked. Long Fei Yi had been waiting for these words. When this young man had just stood up, he had already become suspicious. He sat up and was about to speak, but who would have thought that Kong Shi would suddenly pull out a blade from his calf and stab it into his own heart? Everything happened too suddenly. Even Long Fei Ye's hidden darts could not stop him. "Your Highness Duke of Qin, I beg you to let my grandmother go." After Kong Shi said this, he fell into Grandma Kong's embrace as blood flowed out of his heart. "Save him," Han Yunxi shouted, quickly pushing aside the people in front of her. She first fed Kong Shi a life-saving pill, and then began to stop the bleeding. It was a pity that the wound was too deep and Kong Shi's breathing became weaker and weaker. "Child, hold on. I will definitely give you justice. You're the city lord." Han Yunxi was so anxious that her hands were trembling. Actually, she knew it was impossible to save him. The knife had stabbed right into his heart and was very deep. But she didn't want to give up. Aunt Ru was the second to arrive. As soon as she checked Kong Shi's breathing, she announced his death. He's not breathing anymore. There's no need to save him. Her voice was very cold. Han Yunshi didn't believe it, but the truth was right in front of her eyes. The old woman looked at her grandson in her arms and opened her mouth. Her lips trembled as she tried to cry, but couldn't. How sorrowful was that? She hugged her grandson tightly and fainted before she could cry. The other prisoners on the side all looked over. Although they were powerless to protect themselves, they still looked at the child sympathetically. Han Yunshi was watching all of this. Chu Shifeng, Long Fei raged. Who locked him up? How could someone hide such a large blade until now? As long as a suspect was sent to prison, they would have to undergo a body search. This subordinate searched him personally. This subordinate paid special attention to this child, but didn't find the blade at the time. Chu Shifeng was certain. Long Fei Yi didn't need to worry about Chu Shifeng's work, but everyone had seen the blade come from his calf. Then the person who threatened him into confessing gave it to him. Han Yunshi cold said. The truth was obvious. Kong Shi wasn't the traitor, but the real traitor had bribed him to put on a show and take the blame. If Long Fei Yi hadn't been smart enough to find Kong Shi's grandmother, he might never have discovered the truth. Or if Long Fei Yi had been soft-hearted enough to spare Kong Shi's grandmother, Kong Shi wouldn't have revealed the truth either. Kong Shi had asked Long Fei Yi to protect his grandmother before he died, which meant the traitor had used her life to threaten Kong Shi. Kong Shi had chosen to commit suicide instead of revealing the true culprit, which meant he feared the culprit. It was very possible that the culprit still had something to use against him. Tang Zijin was alarmed. Investigate thoroughly. Anyone who's had contact with Kong Shi over the past few days should be locked up in jail. That's right. Don't miss a single one. Aunt Ru agreed indignantly. Han Yunshi looked at Aunt Ru and said cold, this child can't die in vain. We can't let the people we interrogated suffer for nothing either. Once we find the traitor, we'll make her pay back 1,000 times over. Aunt Ru immediately averted her gaze, but Han Yunshi wouldn't let her go. Aunt Ru, don't you agree? Of course. Aunt Ru immediately replied. Big brother, sister-in-law, we have to investigate this to the end. We have to give Grandmother Kong an explanation. We have to give her an explanation for all the innocent disciples who've suffered. Tang Zijin was so angry that he couldn't speak. Nothing like this had ever happened since he'd taken charge of the Tang clan. Lady Tang looked at the old woman and couldn't bear it. Someone come. Hurry and take Grandmother Kong back and settle her down. She sighed helplessly. Send someone to bury the child properly. Such a young life was gone, just like that. Han Yunshi's heart felt stifled. She wanted to say more, but Long Fei Yi stopped her with a look. Long Fei Yi didn't say much, but left Chu Shifeng here to help Aunt Ru while he left with Han Yunshi. As soon as they were gone, Tang Zijin called Aunt Ru away with an excuse. She was very silent the entire way. Tang Zijin wanted to speak a few times, but stopped himself. Finally, they reached the study and shut the door before he spoke. He got straight to the point. Iru, was it you or not? Aunt Ru looked incredulous. Big brother, what do you mean? Were you the one who revealed the location of the Yaoshui estate to Duamu Yao? Tang Zijin asked coldly. Just as Han Yunshi had said, the traitor hadn't revealed the relationship between the Tang clan and the Duke of Qin's estate, only the location of the Yaoshui estate. Thus, the traitor only wanted Duanmu Yao to cause trouble for Long Fei Yi. Besides Aunt Ru, who else would do such a thing? Aunt Ru spent all her time trying to break up Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi, so Duanmu Yao was the perfect third wheel. Aunt Ru kept shaking her head until Tang Zijin pressed closer. It's just you and me here. Why won't you tell me? How am I supposed to protect you? What should I say? Aunt Ru fumed. You know what's going on. Tang Zijin was furious as well. Big brother, you're suspecting me? You think I'm the traitor? I betrayed the Tang clan? Aunt Ru retorted. This has nothing to do with betraying the Tang clan. Just tell me, were you the one who revealed the location of the Yaoshui estate? Tang Zijin asked seriously. No. Aunt Ru said without hesitation. If it wasn't you, then who was it? Tang Zijin asked again. How should I know? You're asking me, but who am I supposed to ask? Aunt Ru looked at Tang Zijin with an aggrieved expression. Big brother, why are you suspecting me? I don't want to live anymore. Tang Zijin sighed and sat down. He was only suspecting Aunt Ru, but he didn't have any proof. He was just testing her. Aunt Ru was indeed suspicious, but she wouldn't do something as despicable as threatening a Tang clan disciple to convict her. He had already tested her, but Aunt Ru still refused to admit it. She probably wasn't the traitor, right? Who could it be? Big brother, are you still suspecting me? Aunt Ru asked again. Then who do you think it is? Tang Zijin's tone softened. If I knew who it was, would something like that have happened today? Aunt Ru retorted angrily. All right. I was just joking, Tang Zijin explained. Joking? Are you joking about my reputation? Aunt Ru was unforgiving as usual. Tang Zijin was even more certain that she wasn't the traitor. Hurry up and find out who the traitor is. This is no small matter, Tang Zijin said. Aunt Ru inwardly sighed in relief. I know. I'm even more anxious than you. If I don't find out who the traitor is, Faye might start suspecting me tomorrow instead. Tomorrow, I'll go to Three-Way Black Market to investigate and see if Duanmu Yao really did spread the news there. Tang Zijin furrowed his brows, his heart in turmoil. He waved a hand to dismiss her. Even Tang Li's marriage wasn't as annoying as this. Meanwhile, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi were having a private conversation. It has to be her. It has to be her. I'll bet it's her. Han Yunxi was furious. Such a young child can't die in vain. If she has the skills, she should come at me directly. What's the point of playing tricks behind my back? Long Fei Yi pressed down on her shoulder. Han Yunxi was panting for breath and was about to speak when Long Fei Yi covered her mouth. I have a plan. Do you want to listen? Han Yunxi immediately nodded. Of course she'd listen. In any case, she had no way of finding evidence. Maybe Ningjing will be moved and really fall in love with you. Sister-in-law, how did you fall in love with my big bro? Tang Li asked seriously. Wasn't it your big bro who fell in love with me first? Han Yunxi retorted. Tang Li had no chance of winning if he tried to flirt with her. He couldn't stay any longer and silently turned to leave. As soon as he left, Han Yunxi wanted to slip away as well. I'll go take a look at Lady Tang. Unfortunately, she'd barely taken a step when Long Fei Ye's large hand rested on her shoulder. He didn't say a word, but simply held her there. His strength wasn't strong, but it made it impossible for her to move forward. Han Yunxi was well aware of what he was doing, but she kept her back to him and didn't dare to make a sound. Soon enough, Long Fei Ye's other hand brushed past her earlobes and asked, Why are you red? Actually, her earlobes had already turned red from the moment he pressed down on her shoulder. Han Yunxi grew timid and carefully tilted her head to avoid his fingers. Long Fei took a step forward and wrapped his arms around her waist. His handsome face drew close, and he lightly kissed her ear. It was your lordship who fell in love with you first. He released her as soon as he finished speaking, but she stood rooted to the spot. Perhaps it was because he was hugging her, but his kiss was so warm that her entire face grew hot. How could someone as strong as her face always turn red because of this man? Damn it! Han Yunxi didn't dare to stay any longer and hurriedly ran away. She didn't want to go to Lady Tang's place. She'd wanted to run away for a long time. Long Fei Yi didn't stop her, but rather admired her flustered figure with great interest. The more he looked, the better his mood became. This woman was even more of a mystery than the perplexing butterfly illusion. Even a single sentence from her would give him a pleasant surprise. He would never get tired of her. A guard silently appeared. Master, Gu Qishao's replied. How is it? He regained his usual cold and stern demeanor. He said that he still hasn't finished negotiating with Mu Linger and needs some more time. The shadow guard replied truthfully. Long Fei Yi was asking about Medical City's head Elderling and Lady Lianxin. He'd previously given Gu 10 days, but it was long overdue. If it weren't for Han Yunqi taking care of Mu Linger, he wouldn't have been so patient with Gu. Tell him to settle everything by the last day of the month. Otherwise, there's no need to talk to this prince anymore, he instructed coldly. The Council of Elders of Medicine City was under his control. Gu had to go through him to bribe Lady Lianxin regarding the Mu family. Gu Qixiao would understand now that he'd said that. Yes, this subordinate understands. The Shadow Guard also understood and reported. Dr. Gu's side is proceeding according to plan. Dr. Gu said that as long as he can rescue Chu Tianyin, he can guarantee that Chu Tianyin will fully cooperate with your highness's plan. Compared to Gu Beiwei was more reassuring to Long Fei Yi. Tell him that it's the last day of the month. Long Fei Yi hesitated for a moment, then added, as for the time, have them inform that person in the east. The Shadow Guard had no idea what he meant by this. Yes, this subordinate will pass on the message right away. The last day of the month, the 28th of the third lunar month, was the day of Tang Li's wedding. Just what was Long Fei Yi planning? He was confident that he'd find out soon enough. In the following days, the quiet Tang clan grew lively. According to Lady Tang's wishes, Tang Li's wedding had to be held as soon as possible. The matter of the traitor was left to Aunt Ru and Chu Shifeng to investigate in secret without alerting too many people. Tang Zijin was busy preparing for his son's wedding while paying close attention to the traitor. Unfortunately, there was no progress over the next few days. Today, Lady Tang and Tang Zijin had just decided on the menu for the wedding banquet when Han Yunqi arrived. Zijin, you can go busy yourself. Yunqi and I will take a look at the satin that just arrived and prepare more clothes for Ali. Lady Tang couldn't help but grumble. Once my daughter-in-law comes into the family, I won't need to worry about these things anymore. Tang Zijin was half a henpecked man, but he still put on airs in front of Han Yunqi. He nodded sternly and turned to leave. Han Yunqi despised men like him the most. So what if he was afraid of his wife? It wasn't something to be ashamed of. Instead of showing off like this, it was better to openly admit it. That was more admirable. As soon as Tang Zijin left, Lady Tang pulled Han Yunqi to sit down. Speak, what did you find me for? Chu Shifeng investigated for a few days and finally got clear information from the black markets. Duamu Yao never posted a bounty at three-way black market, so everything Kong she said before was a lie. Han Yunqi got straight to the point. Lady Tang never expected Han Yunqi to tell her this. In other words, the traitor wants to draw our attention to three-way black market? Yes. Madam knows the rules of three-way black market as well. It'll take a lot of effort to investigate, Han Yunqi intoned. How despicable. Then what should we do now? Lady Tang asked anxiously. Use an even more despicable method, Han Yunqi said. But we need your help. Me? Lady Tang was puzzled. Han Yunqi hurried forward to whisper in her ear. I've already made arrangements. I used the traitor's name to send a message to Duanmu Yao and arranged to meet her at a pavilion at the foot of the Tang clan tomorrow night. Lady Tang grew bewildered. That's not right. Do you know who the traitor is? A suspect, of course. We used the suspect's name to make the appointment. Han Yunqi grinned deviously. Who's the suspect? Lady Tang grew nervous. It's a secret. You'll know tomorrow night. Han Yunqi purposely kept her in suspense. Lady Tang didn't know about the grudge between her and Aunt Ru. Just who is it? Lady Tang was curious. Does Aunt Ru and Chu Shifeng know? And have you told Zijin and Fei about this plan yet? Lady Tang, don't ask any questions. Just trust me this once, all right? Han Yunqi said seriously. Lady Tang hesitated before nodding. All right, then you're sure Duanmu Yao will come? I'll use a map of all the Duke of Qin's properties as a guide. Do you think she'll show up? Han Yunqi grinned. She'll definitely come. But if Duanmu Yao did show up, how would they prove that the suspect was the traitor? Lady Tang was a little lost. She figured she'd know everything tomorrow night. With Han Yunqi in charge, she had complete faith in her. The next night, Han Yunqi and Lady Tang hid themselves around the pavilion early to wait for the arrival of the midnight hour. The night was dark and windy, causing the lanterns in the pavilion to sway in the wind. Shadows danced around them, creating a frightening scene. There was still the time it took to brew a cup of tea before the midnight hour arrived. Lady Tang couldn't help but ask in a low voice, "Will Duanmu Yao really come?" "She will." Han Yunqi was certain. She wanted the map of all of Long Fei Ye's properties, much less Duanmu Yao. A woman's sixth sense told her that Duanmu Yao would show up no matter what. "Yunqi, if your guesses are wrong and that suspect isn't a traitor, then you can use that person's name to write a letter to Duanmu Yao. She'll only think it's a trap and won't come." Lady Tang said seriously. "How about a bet?" "How about it?" Han Yunqi asked. "What are we betting on?" Lady Tang liked betting. In the midst of their conversation, a servant girl hurried out of a small path in the grass. Lady Tang recognized her at a glance as one of Aunt Ru's servants. "This?" Lady Tang grew alarmed. "You're suspecting. Sure. It's time." Han Yunqi gently pressed Lady Tang down and hit her in the grass. It was the midnight hour. The servant girl she'd arranged for had come out. Would Duanmu Yao show up? Chapter 670. It was already midnight. The night winds in the mountains were especially chilly. The servant girl stood in the isolated pavilion, her neck hunched as she shivered. Other than the swaying weeds, there was no other shadow around the pavilion. After a long wait, Duanmu Yao still hadn't shown up. Without Han Yunqi's orders, the servant girl didn't dare to leave. "She won't come, right?" Lady Tang murmured. Han Yunqi looked at the dim path ahead and was certain. "She will. She'll definitely come. Even if we suspect the wrong person, she'll still come." "How can you be so sure?" Lady Tang didn't understand. If not for her trust in Han Yunqi, she would have left long ago. "Lady Tang, have you ever liked someone?" Han Yunqi asked. "If I didn't like him, why would I marry him?" Lady Tang smiled. "If you like someone, you want to know everything about them." "Everything," Han Yunqi emphasized, stirring Lady Tang's long-dormant heart. She sighed with emotion. "That's right. That's why Duanmu Yao will definitely come," Han Yunqi declared. Looking at her clear, resolute eyes, Lady Tang couldn't help but ask this wondrous woman how much she liked Long Fei Yi. How much did she know about Long Fei Yi? But in the end, Lady Tang didn't ask. She couldn't control the matters between this girl and Fei. After a while, she asked, "Yunqi, then what about loving someone? Can you ignore everything about them if you love them?" Han Yunqi shook her head. "Lady Tang, love is selfish. Loving someone means you want to be their everything. Nothing about their past matters anymore, right?" Lady Tang looked at Han Yunqi and suddenly didn't know what to say. She could only nod her head. She liked this girl more and more. What a frank woman she was. Love was selfish, possessive, and exclusive. But how many people dared to admit it? If Zijin and Iru heard these words, they'd probably do everything in their power to make Han Yunqi leave Fei. How could Fei's everything be just a woman? Even if she was a legend, she couldn't be Fei's everything. Fei's past was too important to ignore. "Yunqi, love is also a form of fulfillment," Lady Tang intoned. "No, at least I won't." Han Yunqi was very stubborn. Madame Tang was about to persuade her when a rustling sound came from the grass not far away. The two of them immediately went on alert. Soon, they saw a familiar figure walking out from the darkness. It was none other than Duanmu Yao. Han Yunqi won the bet again. Duanmu Yao really did come. She walked step by step towards the lonely mountain pavilion. The weak light from the lantern illuminated her pale face. Her internal injuries had not improved. She had written many letters to her master, insisting that her senior brother treat her injuries. However, her master had actually said that her senior brother was also injured and could not help her. He even introduced other martial arts experts to her. She insisted on waiting. She could wait until her senior brother recovered from his internal injuries. A complicated look flitted through Duanmu Yao's eyes when she saw the servant girl, but she didn't say anything. "This must be Princess Yao, right?" the maid asked respectfully. "You weren't the one who asked this princess out. Where's Tang Iru?" Duanmu Yao looked at her loftily. "Her tone sounds very familiar." Lady Tang grew nervous and wanted to speak, but Han Yunqi stopped her with a look. Although Duanmu Yao was injured, She was still on guard and could hear everything around her. Princess Yao, my mistress couldn't come in person because of some urgent business, so she sent me to deliver something, the servant girl replied. Then where is it? Duanmu Yao grew anxious. My mistress said that the debt from before hasn't been settled yet, so it has to be settled first, the servant girl replied. At this, it wasn't just Lady Tang who was nervous. Han Yunqi was tense as well. She lured the snake out of its hole, not the traitor, but Duanmu Yao. Han Yunqi wanted to get information from Duanmu Yao's mouth and prove that her suspect was the traitor. Thus, Duanmu Yao's next words were very important. The tense moment had finally arrived. Debt from before? Does this princess owe her anything? Duanmu Yao retorted coldly. Lady Tang unconsciously tightened her grip on Han Yunqi's hand and looked at her inquisitively, as if asking, "Is it Iru? How could Iru do such a thing?" Han Yunqi gave her a look of certainty. Lady Tang's grip tightened, almost crushing Han Yunqi's hand. However, Han Yunqi had already forgotten the pain. She was waiting for Duanmu Yao to admit everything herself, waiting for Lady Tang to hear everything with her own ears. She didn't care if Aunt Ru apologized to her and Long Fei Yi. She only wanted Aunt Ru to kowtow in front of Grandmother Kong and repent in front of Kong Shi's grave. Princess Yao, you wouldn't have forgotten about the previous matter so quickly, right? The servant girl probed again. Duanmu Yao sneered. Shouldn't this princess be the one getting even with her for the previous matter? She has hurt this princess quite badly. There's no need to talk about other conditions. Hand over the item and I'll write off the previous debt. Princess Yao, what's with your injury? We're all well aware that if you weren't injured, how could you seek treatment from the Duke of Qin? The servant girl mocked. The truth was about to come out. Han Yunqi had also grabbed Lady Tang's hand at some point. The two of them were listening with rapt attention, afraid to miss a single word. Unexpectedly, Duanmu Yao suddenly shouted angrily, "What do you mean?" Princess Yao should understand what this servant means. There's no one else here, so let's not beat around the bush. If Princess Yao wants the map, you have to promise my master one thing, the servant girl continued. Duanmu Yao said coldly, "This princess doesn't know what you're talking about. Tang Iru's injury to this princess won't be forgotten so easily. Go back and tell her that this princess will give her a chance. Give me the map and I'll write off the previous debt. Otherwise, this princess will repay the injury to her Dantian several times over." Hearing this, Lady Tang was bewildered while Han Yunqi was stunned. How could this be? The servant girl wouldn't give up. Princess Yao, you clearly got injured on purpose. My master was only cooperating with you. So how could you? Before he could finish, Duanmu Yao cut him off. What nonsense are you spouting? Are you really Tang Iru's servant girl? Stunned, the servant girl didn't know what to say. Where's the thing I want? You didn't bring it, did you? Duanmu Yao pressed closer, her face sinister. Han Yunqi knew things weren't good and hastily shot out a few needles. Hearing the commotion around them, Duanmu Yao glanced around before she didn't dare to linger. Tell Tang Iru to obediently hand over the map to my estate, or else she'll have to bear the consequences, she warned before turning to leave. The servant girl was so frightened that she choked and fell back into a stone chair, her entire body stiff. Lady Tang and Han Yunqi rose to their feet and exchanged glances. Lady Tang knitted her brows and fell silent for a long time before she spoke. Yunqi, why did you suspect Tang Iru? She might have a bad temper and a bad heart, but she'd never betray the Tang clan or sell out Fei. I can swear on my life on that. Han Yunqi gave a start and didn't pay attention to Lady Tang's words. She couldn't believe the results of her probing. There had to be a problem somewhere. Yunqi, say something. Lady Tang grew anxious at Han Yunqi's expression. Are you still suspecting Iru? You heard it yourself, didn't you? Well, I'll treat this as if it never happened. You have to tell that maidservant to keep her mouth shut. If Iru finds out, the Tang clan will be even livelier. Han Yunqi shook her head. She couldn't figure out what had gone wrong. Long Fei Yi had arranged for this servant girl to stay in Aunt Ru's courtyard, so she was definitely trustworthy. Could it be that Duanmu Yao had discovered something amiss and put on an act? But Duanmu Yao was already here. What else could she discover? The servant girl's words hadn't revealed anything at all. Yunqi, let's go back. We'll talk when we get back. Lady Tang tugged at her to leave. Lady Tang, you should go back first. I want some peace and quiet, Han Yunqi intoned. You still suspect Iru? Lady Tang grew angry. Yunqi, I know you don't like Iru, but you can't just frame her for something like this. What right do you have to suspect her? How was Han Yunqi supposed to explain herself? Her probing just then was an ironclad fact. I was oversensitive. Lady Tang, I still ask for your forgiveness, Han Yunqi said. Lady Tang exhaled in relief. I know you're impatient. Let's go back first. Back on the mountain, Lady Tang gave a few more instructions before leaving. As soon as she was gone, Long Fei Yi appeared. Was I wrong? Han Yunqi asked. Perhaps you were wrong, Long Fei Yi replied. But Han Yunqi refused to believe that she'd made a mistake. It wasn't just her intuition, but her evidence. It's also possible that Kongxi's matter. We've startled the snake in the grass. Long Fei Yi looked at Han Yunqi with a complicated gaze. Once they startled the snake in the grass, it'd be difficult to uncover the truth. But they had no choice but to startle the snake in the grass. Otherwise, Kongxi wouldn't reveal any clues even if he died. This case would only end with Kongxi pleading guilty. In the end, Long Fei Yi came to a decision. Let's wait and see for now. Although Han Yunqi didn't want to give up, she agreed. If they kept investigating, they'd only make the other party more vigilant. Perhaps it'd be easier for them to ignore the matter for a while before investigating again. Long Fei Yi sent Han Yunqi back to her rooms. He didn't enter, but stood by the door. She'd been living in his personal courtyard since coming to the Tang clan, while he went to Tang Li's every night. It was rare for him to send her back so late at night. Han Yunqi looked at him before slowly closing the door. She had an indescribable feeling that the two of them were living in two different worlds. They were together during the day, but separated at night to close their own doors. Just as the door was about to close, Han Yunqi suddenly paused. You're still not leaving? Long Fei Yi replied, Don't worry, your lordship trusts your judgment. She won't be able to escape. Han Yunqi trusted his promise as well. We'll beat her at her own game. She had to tell Chu Shifeng tomorrow and have him put on an act so that the traitor would think she was safe. Let her gloat for a while, then we'll pay her back with interest. Close the door, Long Fei Yi intoned. You go first, Han Yunqi smiled. Be good, close the door first. Long Fei Yi's voice softened. You go first, Han Yunqi insisted. Long Fei Yi said indifferently. The princess consort's heart isn't soft. She's only soft towards children. Wasn't she the same towards Su Xiaoyu back then? Esteemed Wang Fei wasn't stupid, but she wasn't as calm as His Highness Duke of Qin. Kongxi's death had made her impulsive. Actually, Kongxi's death had already startled the snake in the grass. Aunt Ru was a cautious person, so she'd definitely tell Duanmu Yao about it. Under these circumstances, there was no point in probing Duanmu Yao further. The wisest choice was to start with Kongxi. Long Fei Yi had already invited Grandma Kong over, but Kongxi would rather die than reveal the true traitor. This meant that the traitor wasn't only using Grandma Kong to threaten Kongxi, but had other undiscovered threats as well. This was the most valuable clue Kongxi had left behind, and the key to solving the case. Chu Shifeng muttered to himself. It was obvious that he'd forgotten how many of his shadow guard subordinates his mistress had saved. Back at the Duke of Qin's estate, she'd put in many good words for the shadow guard. She wasn't soft-hearted, but kind-hearted. It wasn't clear whether Long Fei Yi heard Chu Shifeng's muttering, but he said coldly, It's good that she lost. That way, the traitor can set his heart at rest. That's right. Esteemed Wang Fei's scheme wasn't completely useless after all. I'm sure Aunt Ru's feeling smug right now. Chu Shifeng grinned. Long Fei Yi rose to his feet and looked around at their quiet surroundings. The mountain range stretched as far as the eye could see. Tangiru, Chu Shifeng gave a slight start. This was the first time he'd heard His Highness call Aunt Rue by her full name. He knew His Highness had steeled his heart to deal with the Tang clan, but he couldn't really do anything to Aunt Rue and Tang Zijin, could he? After all, one of them was His Highness's uncle, the other his aunt. Your Highness, the Tang clan is different. Please think thrice. Chu Shifeng couldn't help but remind him. Actually, the Tang clan head and Aunt Rue hadn't had any major conflicts with His Highness before esteemed Wang Fei showed up. Leaving aside their blood ties, the Tang clan's loyalty to the East Qin imperial clan was comparable to that of the Bailey army. Aunt Rue had been impudent this time, but she hadn't revealed any important secrets beyond the location of Yaoshui. She was only targeting esteemed Wang Fei. In the end, she was still worried about esteemed Wang Fei's origins. Long Fei laughed coldly. Yes, it's different. They don't know how big your lordship's heart is. Even if it wasn't for Han Yunqi, Long Fei had long wanted to take control of the Tang clan in his own hands. Tang Zijin and Tang Iru only had room for East Qin in their hearts. Neither of them understood him, as well as Bailey Yuanlong. Their paths were different, and their hearts were different. He disdained to scheme with them. Chu Shifeng only half understood inside. Master, in any case, don't ruin young clan head Tang's marriage. Don't worry. As his older brother, I'll give him a big present. Long Fei said. There were only 7 days left until Tang Li's wedding. The quiet Tang clan grew more and more lively with each passing day. Lady Tang was a clever person. She never brought up the events of that night again. Han Yunqi listened to Long Fei's words and didn't pursue the matter. She did her best to help Lady Tang prepare for the wedding. Aunt Rue had also changed from her taciturnity to visit Tang Li more and more frequently. Unfortunately, Lady Tang always criticized her suggestions to the point that they were worthless. Today, Han Yunqi and Lady Tang were discussing the layout of the wedding venue when Aunt Rue came by again. Han Yunqi suggested that Lady Tang didn't need to go through the trouble of decorating so many places. She only needed to put some thought into the bridal chamber. Don't touch the other places, just the wedding room. Let Ning Jing feel disappointed first, then she'll be pleasantly surprised when she lifts the veil. Han Yunqi said seriously. Lady Tang praised thoughtfully. First suppress it, then raise it. Wonderful. Tang Li sat on one side and listened, nodding his head like he was pounding garlic. He had no objections at all. What kind of logic is this? Don't tell me you want to curry favor with Ning Jing? Aunt Rue sneered as she walked in. Yes, we want to curry favor with her. Lady Tang smiled. She was very unhappy, but in order for Tang Li to get the arms trade as soon as possible, she and Han Yunqi had to think of a way to help Tang Li win over Ning Jing's heart. Sister-in-law, have you been misled by the people of the Ning family? Why do you want to curry favor with Ning Jing? Do you think Tang Li hasn't been humiliated enough? Aunt Rue asked unhappily. The person who was jabbing at her was Han Yunqi. Han Yunqi sipped her tea and didn't say anything. What are you talking about? Lady Tang said unhappily. Mother, Aunt Rue is calling you stupid and easy to fool. How could Tang Li not interrupt? Aunt Rue slapped him on the head. Brat, you're so impudent. Mother, Aunt Rue is scolding you again. She said you didn't discipline him well. Tang Li laughed and slandered Aunt Rue in a joking tone. You. Aunt Rue was about to hit him again when Lady Tang immediately grabbed her hand. You're so rude. What if you hurt him? It's not like you don't know that mouth of his. How many times have I told you? Why do you still like to bicker with the younger generation? Aunt Rue could only let go. Tang Li stuck his tongue out at her in a show of force. Aunt Rue was so angry that her face darkened. She sat down across from Han Yunqi and asked seriously, Sister-in-law, don't tell me you really want to curry favor with that brat Ning Jing? It's a secret. Lady Tang said mysteriously. Oh, when did I become an outsider? Aunt Rue laughed at herself in disbelief. She glanced at Han Yunqi out of the corner of her eye and added, That's not right. I'm worse than an outsider now. Han Yunqi still remained silent. Tang Li couldn't sit still any longer, and was about to speak when Lady Tang slapped the table. Pa. Leaving aside Aunt Rue, even Han Yunqi and Tang Li jumped in fright. Everyone fell silent. Aunt Rue was resentful, but still a little afraid. She thought Lady Tang was going to lose her temper, but instead she said, "Oh, I just remembered something." Aunt Rue exhaled in relief, but Lady Tang added, "Iru, I've always wanted to ask you, how's the investigation of the traitor going? This is a big deal. It's best if you can uncover the traitor before Tang Li's wedding. You and Chu Shifeng better not disappoint me." Still no progress. "I'll do my best," Aunt Rue replied. "What do you mean by do your best?" Lady Tang grew unhappy. "Don't tell me you can't find anything. Things are a bit tricky. I'll talk to you in detail later. I still have things to do, so I'll be leaving first." Aunt Rue really didn't want to stay any longer. She didn't like this topic. When she reached the door, she couldn't help but look back at Han Yunqi, only to see Han Yunqi chatting with Lady Tang again. She was even laughing as she spoke. She suddenly felt like a joke just then. She provoked Han Yunqi with every word, but the girl had sister-in-law and Tang Li to protect her. She was safe and sound. What skills does this damned girl have to win sister-in-law's trust? She's just relying on Fei's attention. Aunt Rue mused that once Tang Li's wedding was over, she and Tang Zijin should discuss how to deal with this damned girl of unknown origins. She'd hardly reached her courtyard when Chu Shifeng arrived. "Aunt Rue, quick. There's a situation." "What's the situation?" Aunt Rue asked urgently. "We found a clue. Kong Shi's close friend." Chu Shifeng murmured. Aunt Rue's eyes flashed with panic, but she quickly calmed down. There was nothing to panic about. She really was the traitor. But after Kong Shi's death, Duanmu Yao was the only person in the world who knew the truth. After interrogating Kong Shi, Aunt Rue had told Duanmu Yao that she wouldn't fall for any tricks Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi had planned. Duanmu Yao had told her everything that had happened at the Lonely Mountain Pavilion that night. She trusted that after that test, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi would give up and stop suspecting her. So what if they found Kong Shi's close friend now? Kong Shi's close friend was a servant girl from the needle grinding workshop, Jin Se. That girl knew nothing about everything. She wasn't afraid.